with Ruth Means, and we're here to deal with the posted agenda and try to resolve whatever issues you bring before us. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes.
Mr. Vanderwillen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines.
Yes.
Debbie, was there something about the agenda that you wanted me to note?
The first one.
Okay, but I think we can do another one up. That was, okay.
Yeah. Hang on. No, it'll be the RDK. Will be the next one after this.
Okay. We're just taking care of a little last minute agenda thing there. But we still begin at the top of the agenda with protest number 1375, the Harwell's Mansion. Who's here to speak to that? I think it'll be easier if you come, yeah, there. You don't have to stand. No, you
Oh,
can
okay.
sit if you wish. We're all got our hearing aids turned up, so.
That's fine. I'm here on behalf of the assessment.
Certainly, and we'll, first we'll hear from you. And then, we'll hear from Lisa from the assessor's office and deal with whatever issues are raised by other.
Interesting. Do you prefer that I use the microphone or?
I think I'm gonna ask you're Teresa Knox.
I am.
Good to have you aboard, Teresa.
Thank you so much.
Let me read what we have as a formal written statement,
Okay.
just for the record, that we get it in, and then you can address it any way you wish after that. This item is the Harwell building. It's at 2210 South Main Street here in Tulsa. The assessor previously had it on for $2,130,300. They're proposing to leave it at that. You say that you think it should be corrected. In your written appeal, you did not give us a number, so I assume that's where we began.
Sure.
Okay, please.
Well, is this better?
That's probably
Okay.
better.
Okay, I talk with my hands, so I'll try.
Well, I don't know whether you can stick it in that thing there. and
No,
hope-
it'll turn it off, but I
Oh,
could hear
okay.
her when it was laying on the table. I
Oh, you did? Okay, great. I'll just put it right here. So I wanted to, I wanted to ask the board if they would consider evaluating a discount of the rate due to the tenant that we have at the Harwell Mansion in the mission of that tenant, which is a nonprofit 501c3. It is a nonprofit board that I formed myself, but the role that the Harwell plays in the community and what we do for the nonprofit community for the city of Tulsa, pardon me, and for the state of Oklahoma, I wanted to see if there would be a consideration to reduce the taxes. Any amount we would be very grateful for. So I do not have a specific amount in mind.
Okay. As I recall, I looked at a attachment that was sent to me in an email. I'm looking for it to see if it was on there. Yes. This is the attachment you included, which shows a list of people who use the Harwell.
That is
A lot
correct.
of those are not-for-profit.
Correct. I think the majority of those are government agencies.
Okay.
And those are recent. We have a lot more booked the coming year. So we try to either gift the Harwell 100% or have a reduced rate for other nonprofits to help them achieve their goals. I think a recent example, I think it's scheduled next week or the week after. We've donated a mansion to the nonprofit 12 and 12, and we are helping them with a fundraiser. It's their first post-pandemic fundraiser. And we, of course, want to assist them with raising funds to help them achieve their mission. We are asked on a regular basis, primarily by the state of Oklahoma Department of Tourism, to gift the mansion or show the mansion. And we do that on a regular basis. We host a lot of European tourists, reporters, writers, and other people to help push the agenda of the state of Oklahoma, either as a music destination, a film destination, a tourist destination. Our neighbors to the south, for example, the Gathering Place, they requested to host a board meeting there. Of course, we gifted the mansion to them to allow them to do that. That same particular organization 2 weeks ago asked us to help them host a guest that they brought in from LA. And so we reduced, they did have a budget. It wasn't our posted rates, but of course we allowed that person to stay at the mansion. But also what we do is we educate them about Tulsa's history. We have an archive, we do historic tours. And then again, we just want people that travel to our city to have a really wonderful experience, and we use the mansion to achieve that. There are no paid employees, there are no dividends, there's nothing like that. My company, which is the owner of the mansion, charges rent, but it is at a reduced rate, and it's prorated based upon what the foundation or the nonprofit is able to afford. It is significantly below fair market rate for the mansion, but we do have a lease that states that.
In your case, though, you are not, that is the owner of the building is not a not-for-profit, not a 501c3.
That is correct. I'm a real estate holding company. And the reason I developed a business model through the Harweldon is that we ended up spending significantly more than what I had budgeted, of course, when we got in there. And plus, so many people wanted to be a part of the Harweldon Mansion. Our first donation, of course, was the Foundation for Tulsa Public Schools. We allowed them to have designer showcase in the mansion. It was their largest fundraise in their history when we did that. And ever since then, we've continued to open the mansion to the general public.
Let me ask a couple more questions, and I'll give them
Sure.
a chance to. I'm curious about the history. When did you acquire the building, and from whom did you purchase it?
Okay, yes, absolutely. Well, going back to the original history, of course, it was constructed in 1923 by Earl and Mary Harwell. Of course, Harweldon means house of the Harwells. And so it's just part of the amazing Tulsa story of what the oil industry did for our community. And so Mr. Harwell, his company later went on to become Mobil, which is ExxonMobil today. What was interesting when I first acquired the property is there wasn't a lot of history on the Harwell family. In this community, of course, we hear about the Phillips, Skelly, J. Paul Getty. So I took it upon myself to learn everything that I can. I acquired the original blueprints. I interviewed over 200 people. I learned everything that the Harwell family did for Tulsa. We documented it through video and through an archive. And we also do history tours on Tuesdays and Thursdays through the mansion. And so Mr. Harwell passed away in 1950. His wife, Mary, was still alive until her passing in 1967, at which time she donated the mansion to the Arts Council of Tulsa. That was a 2-year-old nonprofit in this community. And so the Arts Council, which today we know as AHA, held the mansion for 50 years. They have a property they built downtown in the Arts District, and they were not financially able to maintain and keep that property. So they put it on the marketplace for sale, and I was able to acquire it. So I bought it from them, and my intention was just, well, it was an impulse purchase. But I was able to purchase it, and it took me nearly 2 years to restore it. It is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is the 5th property in the city of Tulsa to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Because it was under the radar all of these years, it wasn't ADA accessible, and it also did not meet commercial codes for the public, even though they had events that held hundreds of people in the past in the property. So we did work with the fire marshal's office and our architect, and we renovated the mansion to commercial specs. So it now has sprinklers, it's ADA accessible, and it's very safe for the general public to come in. So that was a little over 3 years ago, and we opened just prior to the pandemic.
When did you actually purchase it from? I'm just trying to establish enough history so the board understands, because essentially when you purchased it, it sounds like that's when it lost its not-for-profit status. That is the Arts and Humanities Council.
Yes, yeah, I purchased it from a nonprofit with a for-profit entity.
Okay. But when,
You know what, that's like, I'm trying to remember my life.
I bet she knows.
If I could help.
Oh, yes, please.
The deed that we have from the county clerk's office shows on May 16, 2018.
Sounds about right.
All right, I'm gonna let, those were kind of the questions off the top of my head. I will ask to see if my other board members have questions that generally you want to ask Teresa about the mansion.
New knowledge again. I was on the board of the Arts and Humanities Council for years. We owned it. So I was fearful I was going to have to recuse. It sounded like I would not have to do that now.
Yeah.
Privately.
Correct.
Okay.
Ruth, do you have any other question you want to
I'm
ask?
just trying to understand, you're asking for a portion to be nonprofit or?
Correct. I
Would you
mean, I would be happy with any amount, but due to the continued request by not only the nonprofit community, but our government, I felt like there would be an opportunity for us to pay a reduced amount.
I don't have you have a list of nonprofits that are housed there, is that what you
No,
said?
there's no, that we open the mansion up to other agencies and organizations and nonprofits in our community. Everything from donating the mansion for fundraisers to allowing them to use it, to host an event, or to have an opportunity to sell Tulsa to, the general.
They're allowed to use it at what cost? Or
Sometimes it's 100% granted to them. Sometimes it's at a reduced rate.
What's the determinant there as to whether someone gets charged a fee or?
Well, generally speaking, our prices are published and anyone can book the mansion. For example, we have the PGA in here this week, and the majority of them are paying our published rates. So we have a form. If you go to our website, down at the index, we have a request for donation. But most of the time, people just send us emails or call us and ask that we, if we could work with them or what we can provide to them.
So is your occupancy pretty good, not so good?
We stay steady. Yeah. I mean, we stay booked on a regular basis. We can't accommodate every request because, it was built as a home. So it's not like some of our bigger venues here in town.
I think those are the general questions we have from the board. My guess is, and she'll explain to us all, but when you purchased it, then it went off of that non-for-profit status or exempt or whatever they had going in. And now the assessor is obviously challenged by law to treat you as a commercial
Right.
operation. Therefore, they have to assess a property tax.
I understand. The tenant is the Heritage Society of Tulsa, which is a nonprofit that occupies the full property. So he's even though I know a lot, just as a native Tulsan, I know a lot about the history, and I, invested the time and energy in creating the business model that's in there right now. We purely, operate as the landlord, basically. So the tenant is a not-for-profit. So which is different than the Arts Council because it was basically owner occupied by the nonprofit.
Yes, okay.
Okay,
So are you a 501c3?
yes, correct. The tenant is,
But not you, not the
No.
landlord.
not me, no.
Yeah. that
Now, I
was-
own several properties in town, 4 historic properties, and it's owned by me and my real estate holding company, which is a LLC.
Or you rent it up 50%? What
Yeah.
percentage of it?
Yeah, the tenant rents 100% of the property. So it's just like the Arts Council, they have multiple tenants, everyone from the ballet to Circle Cinema to the Philharmonic, to the Hispanic American Foundation. They had multiple nonprofit tenants. We have one nonprofit tenant.
I'm going to ask that the assessor staff identify yourself first for the record.
Lisa Weintraub, Tulsa County Assessor's Office, General Counsel. I need to lay a little bit of background here for the board to understand. Ms. Knox did file an application for an exemption for the property for the 2020 tax year. And that was addressed by Ms. Biddle in our office, who handles all of our exemptions. And Ms. Biddle had, in looking at and assessing what was given to her, had decided that the property did qualify for an exemption. But when the information made it up to the executive staff for review, we reversed her decision. So I wanted to be open with everybody here in this room what happened. And the basis was that we did not see a charitable use of the property that would qualify it for 100% exemption under Oklahoma law. And as previously been discussed, when the Arts Council did sell it, I believe it was $2.9 million. It was sold to Hickory, is it Hickory Heritage or Hickory House Properties, which was one of Mrs. Knox's LLCs. And then the next year, Hickory House sold it and divided into 3 separate parcels. So what we see
He didn't
to
sell it, they're just subsidiary.
Transfer.
Yes, yeah, transfer.
they transferred it. And so the portion that was transferred and is considered transferred into the Harwell and Mansion LLC, which is once again a real estate holding company, is what's before the board today. We aren't addressing the other 2 properties. And so when you talk about the $2,100,000, I believe that's the value our office has put on that one account, and that's all before the board today. So I wanted to lay the background because when the assessor's office denies an application for an exemption, the taxpayer does have the right to appeal that. And so that's what we encourage Ms. Knox to do. So this is an appeal from our office, if you will, of our denial of her application for an exemption, and it's proper before this board. So I wanted to let you know that. And then with the permission of the board, I was wanting to show a video. That's a 3-minute and 30-second video. And it's an interview with Ms. Knox, but it's discussing the use of the Harwell property, with the permission of the board.
Please.
A large estate sitting on a full city block. Its history and the memories made here fill every square inch.
The mansion was built in 1923 by oil baron E.P. Harwell, or Earl Harwell, and his lovely wife, Mary Harwell.
EP founded the Mobil Oil Company in Oklahoma, known today as ExxonMobil. He, his wife, and their daughter Margot called the mansion home for many years.
And she was raised in a mansion, and then when she got married and had children, the grandchildren grew up here as well.
In fact, you can see Margot's wedding dress on display here in what's now the home's bridal suite.
She got married in the mansion in 1942, and so we have the photos, and we also have the newspaper that featured the wedding in the Tulsa Daily World.
Mr. Harwell passed away in 1950. His wife oversaw the mansion until her passing nearly 2 decades later.
And upon her passing in 1967, she bequeathed the mansion to the Arts Council of Tulsa, which at the time was a brand new arts council nonprofit in this community.
Today, the Arts Council, known to Tulsans as AHA, is in their newly constructed home in downtown. After the move, Harweldon went on the market, catching the eye of now owner Teresa Knox.
And to me, when I saw that it was for sale, it was like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But no, it really is a dream come true. I was born in Tulsa. I love everything about our city and our history.
For years, upstairs was closed off to the public. It was mainly offices for the folks running the Harweldon. It's since gone through a major renovation, and now you can stay here one night or more.
We have 4 luxurious suites in the main house, and then we have 2 two-bedroom suites in the carriage house.
Since its donation in the late 60s, the Harweldon has hosted countless events like parties and weddings. Today, it's even more.
Not only is it an event center, it is a bed and breakfast.
Complete with an option for private butler concierge services.
We can really curate an amazing experience for locals who are looking for just a night out on the town and a place to stay or a staycation, but also tourists.
Each room is named after a tree, shrub, or flower you'll find on the property, from the primrose to dogwood, and of course, the redbud.
And since the mansion sits on one full city block with so many beautiful trees that have been here 100 years plus, we wanted the rooms to be a nod to the gardens and the botanical aspect of the property.
The lilac suite really was lilac back in the day.
That bedroom was always the guest bedroom of the Harwell family, and it was always that lavender, and they called it the lilac suite.
Before renovations, Knox toured the home with the Harwell granddaughter, who grew up in the mansion.
She walked through the mansion with us, and she described what it was like growing up here. She told us some really intimate stories about what it was like.
The rooms are cozy, yet grand at the same time. Book one for a night, or the entire mansion for your next event. You can also call ahead for a historic tour.
We really want people to walk away from the Harweldon Mansion in our city and think, I want to go back there. They want to tell their friends and family about visiting Tulsa.
At the Harweldon Mansion in Tulsa, I'm Jason Grubbs for Discover Oklahoma.
Thank you for the presentation. It is wonderful what she has done with the property. I mean, she's definitely preserving a historic building. But we can't ignore in our office that it also is being used for revenue producing property. And there's nothing against that. The properties throughout, as you see every day when in your board meetings, properties are used for revenue producing in this county. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just we have to use a critical lens when somebody is looking to have property removed from the tax roll. So we have to look at the use of the property. The law is so clear in Oklahoma for charitable purposes. If it's a charitable use, in other instances, if it's a nonprofit college or school, it's exempt because it's owned by that entity. But when it comes to charitable or religious, we have to look at the use of the property. And so Ms. Biddle is here. This is the first time I've heard that there's a lease with a 501c3. I know that I did have Jennifer reach out to see if there was a designated area or space that was occupied by the 501c3. And it was my understanding that there was no designated area. So as the board probably has seen with some of the appeals we've had before, it's not unusual for our office to prorate part of a building if part of it's being used for an exempt purpose and then the rest of it is taxable. It's just I didn't have that scenario presented, or the executive board didn't have that scenario presented to us.
So is there a piece now that's clearly identifiable as nonprofit?
So the lease occupies the entire property.
Who does that?
The lessor of the property, or the lessee of the property. The structure itself is not self-sustainable from a financial perspective. I mean, it's not, but anyway, which is fine. I mean, it's a project that I've taken on, and of course, I always want to pay my fair share of taxes. But the tenant and that formal lease agreement went into effect 2 years ago. It does occupy 100% of the property, and but on the other hand, Jennifer knows this. We also use the property for our corporate office per se. And we don't, that's the tenant that doesn't take up a particular place. We get mail there and we have our staff meetings there. But again, the Harwell in itself doesn't have any paid employees or anyone generating income, out of there. They do pay rent to my real estate holding company. And I really appreciate your comments. And like I said, we didn't really know what was going to happen with Harwell after we renovated it and put in those original bedrooms. They were gutted out in the 1970s. So we really did try to restore it back to its 1920s glory. And I'm glad that we did that. So we are asking that you would just consider, not necessarily the full amount, but even a partial exemption of the property taxes. But for some reason, if you'd like not to, we'll support whatever decision that you make,
I'm still, I think what he's going after too is exactly what Lisa suggested. When you say that it's not for profit, one, I need to know who they are, what they do. And then the other is, you said they lease from you the whole, 100%.
Correct.
What's confusing to me, obviously, from that we just saw, you promoted as a bed and breakfast. Who collects that revenue? The not-for-profit or some other entity?
It's only the not-for-profit. They're called the Heritage Society of Tulsa, and they are a 501c3. They are tax exempt with the IRS, and they occupy the full property. They collect, they're the ones who donate the mansion to any other nonprofit. Again, Harwell then is just the name of the structure. I own the real estate, and again, the Heritage Society of Tulsa is the tenant.
Since they are a tenant, though, that doesn't mean as landlord, you get revenue directly from them. They have a lease with you.
That is correct.
Okay. I think that's where we're struggling a little bit, both the tax assessor and you, to try and decide if there is some way that exempt organization, that some of it is identified specifically for their use. But when you say it's 100% and yet you're using a large portion, it looks like, for revenue, then how much of that passes through to you as the landlord?
They pay a reduced rate. I think it's about $6,000 a month. She uses our accountant in our office, approximately, which is significantly below what you would pay for square footage. But you're right. I mean, the bed and breakfast, charges people either donated or reduced rate, but all of that, those funds flow through the not-for-profit. If we were to, one thing that might help, if you don't want to make a decision today, is to review the 990 of the.
I'm trying to understand when you say flow through, does it come to you
No,
as a landlord?
no,
What
only
does this particular not-for-profit, the one you call the historical
the
heritage?
Heritage Society.
Okay, what is their program? What is their mission? That is, a not-for-profit always has to have a mission and a board. She's a
Right. Their mission is to preserve the historical aspect of their property and to, not this property, just any historical property. I don't know the exact mission statement, but it's basically to, honor the legacy of Tulsa and to share that. So they do this.
Other than Harwell, then they have other properties.
No, but they promote Tulsa and the history of Tulsa.
Yeah, that's, which would fit under the description of what I'm asking for when I ask permission. I do wish to recognize Lisa.
Thank you. I believe that the charitable organization, the Heritage Society of Tulsa, is actually an organization, corporation that Ms. Dixon is involved with, the family. It is, I'm sorry, Knox.
No, that's all right. No, it's all
I
right.
apologize. Her family.
Yeah.
They're the.
No. Yes, and that's what, yeah, I had shared that early on. I thought it was really important because again, it's a property that we want to maintain. And my company, I'm not in the bed and breakfast business, and I'm not in the venue rental business, but I thought it was important to keep the mansion open, hence why we ended up going in this direction, for the property.
I guess all I'm trying to do, and maybe, it sounds like there's some kind of legal issue here. Obviously, we deal with the results of legal determinations, but we're not really in the business of making legal determinations. Lisa, is there some way that she could what shall I say, apply to, I don't know, tax roll correction board or somebody and try and get a review of whether they could get a whole or partial tax exemption?
So part of the process here, the appeal to this board, the Board of Equalization, would allow this board to also make a determination if there should be a pro rata exemption granted. So once again, this is a review of the 2020 year. In our office, would look at what was happening with the property every year after that. But yes, so this is a venue for her to use. She can also go before the Board of Tax Roll Corrections, but it's the same thing. It's asking the board to consider giving a pro rata share exemption to the property.
What confuses me is, and
I know sometimes it sounds.
just because I get confused doesn't mean that's the final. That's why we got two other people here. When you say that there's a not-for-profit, the Historical Heritage Group, that operates the building 100%, and yet you say there's this money that flows to somebody from all this leasing that's going on, and yet you also have in your LLC, the owner of the physical property, a lease that grants you $6,000 a month at least.
So, my real estate holding company, I have a lot of tenants. I have restaurants, I have galleries, I have educational institutions, I have all different types of tenants. And this is really no different. What was different about this property is I developed a business model behind it versus just renting to someone who has an art gallery or a restaurant. Because I thought it was important. I love the property. I fell in love with it. I was there every day managing the renovation of the project. And so I developed a business model, but the more and more of, people reached out, can you do this? Can you be in this film? I was even asked by the state tourism department to do this film. It's not something we solicited. We had no interest. It was to help sell Oklahoma. And so as I started archiving and documenting, traveling to Kansas City to find the blueprints and everything, it's like, this is, bigger than me. It's bigger than my real estate holding company. I formed a 501c3 because there are other renovating in another project at 3rd and Trenton, the historic church studio. And it's almost similar that it costs so much to renovate and operate, but everyone wants to be a part of it. Everyone wants to tour and be in there because it's like a tourist attraction. That I felt like the best model was for me to step away and just be the landlord and to operate something that would be beyond me. And so that's why the tenant is a 501c3 that I did form, and I am on the board. And so I understand, and I appreciate your comments about a potential conflict of interest. But there's one check that my real estate holding company gets, and it's a rent check. It's due at the 1st of each month. Not for sure when you usually make the payment, but it goes to the Heritage Society of Tulsa, 501c3, pays a rent payment every month to our real estate holding company. There's no other funds, going through. And when the property needs things, like right now, the carriage house basement is flooded. My real estate holding company pays for all of that. We have to subsidize the operations of it. And so, but that's the only flow through. There's not, anything else happening there. And so at some point, our desire is for them to get up to a fair market rate of rent. So when it is time, I can step away completely and the board will continue developing and operating in it. But we have a board of 4 people. We meet quarterly and it's about pushing the mission of the foundation or of the nonprofit. So
It's just, you described your other properties and the tenants you have there, I'm guessing. Are there any other not-for-profits that rent other properties from you?
yes, I have 3 educational institutions that are property tax exempt.
Because it seems to me that's where I have the lack of legal clarification, that
Okay.
you have not established an exempt status for this other historical heritage, not-for-profit yet.
Yes.
And that's undoubtedly why they get stuck with putting you on.
We have the lease agreement, we have board meeting minutes, we have full financial statements. You can see very clearly what the money is being used for to push the mission. And so it's, the Harweldon was never an investment to be a profitable venture, and it is not a profitable venture maintaining a 100-year-old mansion in the fashion that we are maintaining it. So,
Sure.
but like I said, I will support anything that the board decides if you so think that
Trying to
can be
figure out
prorated.
how-
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to decide. something.
Yeah, no,
That's all
it's
I'm
a
struggling with.
complicated
Charles, what
situation.
questions do you have? I mean, I think if you clearly had this other group that was either exempt or had been able to establish its not-for-profitness with a mission that was clear, the board would have a really easy time just saying,
Well,
okay,
we
sure.
submitted the mission and some other documents early on, and I'm sorry I don't have those right in front of me, but
Charles,
The ultimate beneficiary of these reduced taxes flows directly to you or to one of your institutions or companies. Who is the beneficiary of the reduced taxation?
who doesn't pay?
right. Well, currently, my for-profit entity pays the property taxes, so but it is a triple net lease with a tenant, so they are supposed to be, that ultimately they're required to pay all of the utilities and all of the property taxes and the insurance, but they're not financially to a point to do that. So right now, it certainly would benefit my for-profit entity.
And the ultimate beneficiary of the reduced taxation is you or one of your entities.
Yeah, so if they get a reduction, even,
Well, if the
candidly,
decision
yeah,
comes down, is it taxable, is it not taxable?
correct. Yeah. I think so.
And
There's
as long as
different
it's-
ways you could look at it, so.
Well,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I think that's what.
So
But ultimately, we don't have to open the mansion up the way that we have been. And so I think ultimately, the city of Tulsa is a beneficiary, especially when you look at it compared to how it was being maintained before. So,
I think you're doing good work.
Oh,
Don't
thank you.
misunderstand.
no, I
This is
understand.
important. It's just
No,
trying
I
to
see
deal
all
with the fact that-
perspectives. No, I see all perspectives, and so I certainly understand any concerns that you have.
All right, Lisa, I think, did you want to address something I raised?
Just a few things. So even if it is a property that is owned by for-profit LLC, Harweldon Mansion LLC, even if they lease it in full to a 501c3 for that company to use, if that company, the 501c3, is the entity that's responsible for the bed and breakfast and the event center, is that an exempt purpose? You don't look at just the fact that it's a 501c3
I
who's got the lease.
Yeah.
You look at, are they charging? Are they in competition with the DoubleTree downtown? Are they in competition with other bed and breakfasts here in Tulsa? Is it a revenue producing property? So something that the Oklahoma Supreme Court reviewed back in 1945, it's that old, is they used to say the property was exempt in full if it was owned by a charitable organization and the charitable organization was renting it out, as long as that charitable organization used that rent money for the purpose of their charity. But in 1945, the Supreme Court said, that's wrong. We realize now, and even said, even with a mature looking at what we've got here. What that would cause if we continue is for charitable organizations to buy revenue producing properties, go into competition with actual for-profit companies. The charitable organizations would be able to use that rent money to keep their entity going and not have to suffer like for-profit companies. And so that's why we have to look at this with a critical eye. It's nothing personal whatsoever. It is a wonderful thing that she has done with this property. We have to remember that we have other taxpayers in Tulsa, and we have to treat everyone fairly. And so that's why we're looking at this. That's why we had to dig into these to try and see what we've got. And if we find out that a not-for-profit organization is just leasing, 200 square feet, 500 square feet of a place, we usually are pretty generous about saying, okay, we will exempt that because they're showing us that that's their office. We have a property, and I was reminded of this the other day, that it's owned by a church. It's a large parcel owned by a church, but most of it's being used for revenue producing purposes. Part of it is being used for a church office, and we exempted that portion. So that's what we were trying to find here. We could do that here, and we have not. So,
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the sticking point for us too today. Ruth, you haven't had a chance to speak up about this, but it sounds like what Lisa just described is the current status of the situation is still there, revenue producing. And since that revenue is going to, well, in this case, right now, it's passed through your LLC, that agency, the ultimate owner, is receiving the revenue and you're taxable.
Yeah, well, the only revenue that my entity receives, of course, is the rent payment each month.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense because we are a viable substitute, or a competitor of an Airbnb.
Other
Yeah, so I mean, I understand, from that perspective.
I think all I was looking for was to see if there was some way we could identify a part of it that really did have a potential exempt status, but I haven't still figured out a way that this entity, the Historical Heritage Group, does anything more than run a bed and breakfast. That's my issue. Is that fair to say right now? That's what they're doing in Harwell.
I think the significant portion of their revenue is the venue rental. And but all of the revenue goes to them. I mean,
Yes.
100% of the revenue goes to them, and then they
Pay the lease.
yes, pay
Yeah.
for the lease and any other expenses.
Is there a surplus over the revenue that is much greater than what they have to pay, the 6,000 each month?
It's yes, I mean, they're able to, but again, a lot of the expenses, like the property taxes, are being paid by my real estate company. But in the lease, it says, that we'll subsidize it until they can pay the current market. Yeah. So, but I'm really pleased. I mean, they're busy and they're picking up. And they're doing really well. So.
And missions that you see them continuing to expand, that would produce a not-for-profit, is not just leasing a bed and breakfast, but running other things which they don't get revenue for, or all of them revenue producing right now.
Well, everything is kind of an a la carte menu. You can look on the website that photographers use the facility, historic tours. A lot of those things, even the bed and breakfasts, are donated or reduced, or they're charged at full price. All of the funds that come into the not-for-profit help achieve the objectives of the mission of the nonprofit. Yeah.
Is there any other ideas right now? I must admit, I seem stuck with simply saying that I will move that we sustain this as a taxable entity.
Based on the information that we received today, I don't have any other way than to just wait and sustain as a taxable.
Charles?
I concur with the conversation.
Okay.
We got a tax place.
You might want to work on trying to see if you can figure out a way to differentiate the mission of the part of it that would not be simply producing revenue. Because that's the sticking point, I think, both for the assessor's office and for the board today, which is if there are other things going on that don't produce revenue, then, you know, maybe you have a shift in an exempt status for at least
Yeah.
that portion of the use of our wealth. But right now, it looks like a bed and breakfast, as they say, if it's a bed and breakfast duck,
Yeah.
walks like a duck, then we treat it like a duck.
Yeah, no, we put the bedrooms in and we thought, at first we weren't going to rent them, but it just made sense to let people enjoy the mansion.
I agree, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we saw there. I'm sure the Oklahoma Tourist Bureau is
Yeah.
extraordinarily happy that you have done.
And I'm sure some of these foundations can pay a little bit more. So,
Well, you can come back to us anytime that you feel that you've reached some places where you should have an option to have at least a portion of your
yeah, I think
situation.
daily it's donated daily, so I think so.
It would be to develop that, have your account develop all that donated time
Yeah.
and numbers.
Our financials, we've
There you
submitted,
go.
but yeah.
You'll be able to do something. All right, I shall move that we, after this extended discussion, shall sustain the assessor's previous and current value of $2,130,300 for the Harwell Mansion. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to sustain. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes.
Mr. Van Wille,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes,
Yes, this is the fair market value established by Harwell being operated essentially as a bed and breakfast.
If I may, just for clarification for the record, and is the board also finding that the full value is taxable?
Yes, that's my way I understand what we can do.
Yeah.
Me too, yes. Well, let's hope we, in our deliberations, pick up a little speed here.
Otherwise we get home.
Second that.
Well, I was supper. I believe the other property that is similar is this one that is 1392. Is that the one you just handed me? Yes, it is. It's on the agenda as 1392. That is RDK LLC, ATT, Tim Bales. It's here for that property.
What about these others that are before that one?
I'm sorry.
The other ones, the store master funding?
We'll get back to them.
There's telephone.
Oh, okay.
That's the whole idea of the deal.
Okay.
And you two guys who are here, please. And then we'll go on the telephone. Not very interesting to watch us do.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
After all, we just put you through.
Put downs in for sure.
So which one are we going to? 13?
We're going to the one that is number 4 on our agenda, RDK LLC ATT, attention to Bales. Let me read into the record what I've got here in writing, and then we'll let them address the matter. And obviously, the assessor staff is here to address the board too. This matter is this building is located at 222 North Garnett Road here in Tulsa. It was previously on for 2,358,300 after the informal. They lowered it to 2,145,000 even. He says in his appeal that he believes it should be currently down to 1,600,000 for the following reason. Not a good area, low occupancy. Okay, please feel free to address the board with whatever. I did look, I assume, yeah, you gave us a bunch of stuff. I haven't had a chance to see it yet. But go right through, go on. Take
It's
us through.
good bedtime reading.
Oh, boy. Take us through your.
Okay. All right, so this is the Best Western Hotel in the northeast part of Tulsa. This is not a good area of town. It's has some issues. It was built in 1978, has 106 units. It's fair condition, and of course, the location is not that great. So the owner has struggled with it. Here you can see the average daily room rate, which I have a star report, is the next deal, piece of paper. Continued competition from lots more hotels, income valuation, and, it's a bad area. So in the next page, I have the star report, and it was occupancy of 47.9. And it had an ADR of 49.92. That would be on the year-to-date occupancy. That's almost 20 points less than what it was the year before.
How much?
20 points. If you go to the next page, I have a compilation of comps. These are hotels that are similar in age and area. Two of them are flags. 3 of them are not, which is current with what some people say it's worth less. Judge that. So these are very good comps. Their cells not too far from the property, and both fully open. And they came out at the average sales price of $37 a square foot. You can see that on page 4.
Were these all sales in the last year or two? Is that it?
Yes. So if you use a sales comparable value, you have average price per square foot of $37 a square foot. The subject has 44,384 square feet. That gives you about a value of $1,642,000. Then we have a financial statement from 2019. And if you go through the expenses on that, then
Is there some reason you didn't update it to 2020?
yeah, the next one is 2020.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes. Go right ahead.
Just seeing if you pay attention.
Quick. So 2019, and here you have a list of the expenses. We made a little money. On the next page, we show that we add back the depreciation because that was an expense we can't allow. Mortgage interest is not something we can allow, so we put that back. We took out a conservative replacement reserve. We have a cap rate there that's just your non-loaded. And we took the taxes as used as an expense and we added those back to the net. Okay, I know we've had problems with that before, but I don't know. I think it's an easy way to do it, but some people don't. So on the loaded cap rate, we have 11.5, and that gives us a value of 2.3. And that was the year before COVID. This year, our 2020, our our income went down quite a bit. And on the workup of this, we had lower net. We added back the depreciation, mortgage interest, and have a replacement reserve. We have a net. We added back the taxes. We can't use them. And the cap rate gives us a value of $1,368,000. Okay. On the next page, we have them combined. We have the comp value of 1.6. 2019 income value is 2.3, and a 2020 income value of 1.3. So you can look at these as a combination together, or you can look at them as individual. The property's worth 1.6, I think is a closer value, and then the higher value is 2.3, and using 2020 and comp, come up with 1.3. If you add them all, if you average them all, it come up with 1.7.
So we're looking at a difference of anywhere from what the county wants of about 500,000, something like that.
I think the comp value is more stable considered to that be, because people actually buying something, paying for something.
The 1.6, that's what you're talking about. And your income value of that 219, the 2019 of 2,320, you think is just wasn't stabilizable, that the COVID, that it won't bounce back. Escape COVID.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, other questions of the presentation from other members of the board?
I don't have a question.
I guess the reason I mean, other than the not good area, which is stable, the whole idea that you had a bad year, it's always difficult for us in these motels. This is not a new deal that we see from time to time. Having a bad year is not, we can't give you much for that because you're in a business where we know there's cycles going on, whereas the county goes on from year after year after year with fairly predictable, stable expenses of their commitments to public services of various kinds, schools, et cetera. So that's always why it's difficult in these kind of properties for the board to do more than a little adjusting if it can when you have a predictable bad year. And obviously, COVID-19, we hope, is coming to its end. But that's my viewpoint. Now, other members of the board, you want to ask questions, you want me to just go ahead and let the assessor, please, the assessor identify yourself.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Oh, yes.
I apologize. My name is Jay Barnett. I'm an attorney for Mr. Bales and for the taxpayer in this case.
Sure.
And we would like to make an objection to on the record at this point to the assessor presenting any evidence in this case.
I see.
On the basis that they have not complied with the requirements of 682876. I'm sorry, excuse me, sorry, yes. That requires that they provide to this board on receipt of the notice of appeal, the county board of equalization by the taxpayer, the county assessor shall, so it's not optional, provide the county board of equalization with all information submitted by the taxpayer, data supporting the dispute evaluation of a written and a written explanation of the results of the informal hearing. It's our understanding Tulsa County is the only county that for whatever reason does not comply with that statute. That is a due process statute.
Explain to me what you see specifically missing from this meeting, this hearing. You're saying something should have happened already after the informal,
Yes,
before we had this meeting.
Yes, 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 Mr. Chairman.
What was that?
So it is exactly what I just read, that the county assessor is tasked with providing to this body all of not only the appeal and the basis of the appeal submitted to them by Mr. Bales, but also their supporting data and a written explanation of that supporting data. Now, our understanding, and it could be incorrect, and I would love for it to be, is that from checking with your secretaries that they did not provide that information. And statute requires that they do that immediately. In other counties where the assessor fails to do that, and I can elaborate on this, it's going to, I'll do as much law geek lawyer stuff as you would like. But there's a good reason. There's a due process basis why other counties where if the assessor fails to meet that burden, okay, they are not allowed to present evidence at the hearing. They may cross-examine the evidence that we have provided. They may challenge that, but they may not provide evidence of their own. And I think the reason for that you see borne out in just the previous hearing where we had someone sitting here who was not prepared for the evidence that was presented to this board. And that's a violation of due process.
Let me ask you, I'm trying to understand the procedural process, question you're raising. Okay?
Yes, sir.
If they sent us this packet of information already that we received several days ago via email for our reading, does that meet your requirement?
If it includes all the requirements of 2876, so if whatever is in that packet, if it is our information, they can cross-examine our information. If they provided fresh information to this body that was not part of our appeal, thank you very much.
That's what the clerk sends us.
Okay,
No, that's your affidavit you signed.
yes, ma'am. Did I sign?
No, that's the
Did they
affidavit
sign?
that the board signs. They shall not have any,
So
communicate with the assessor's office before the hearing.
So that's a different requirement. That's a requirement that there be no informal communications, no argument presented to the, and it's an open records requirement. That they not basically hear, and okay, so let me step back. This is a quasi judicial proceeding. So a lot of times you see mirrored in these proceedings exactly what happens in the courts of law. So you're not allowed as a judge to have a discussion with one member, with one side, but not the other. Okay, and that's what this addresses. It's an open records requirement, and that's what that part addresses. It does not deal with the requirement of 2876 at all. 28, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
You're fine, sir.
No, and you're fine too.
Thank you.
We deal with different kinds of procedural issues because, yeah, you're right. We're quasi judicial, which kind of cuts both ways. What I would like to ask, do we have somebody who can go upstairs and see if Lisa's still around? You did send that because when we get into these, where you're reading me a statute, all that, we want the assessor's lawyer, which is what Lisa is, she works for him as staff, to be here to inform the board of the assessor's viewpoint of that law, not because we are questioning your viewpoint. We just need to have both sides, as you're saying.
You're entirely appropriate to question my viewpoint, Mr. Chairman. I don't know what you think that. So yes, no, this is our position, and we're certainly amenable to hearing the assessors.
I must admit, it is a new question that has been raised, as he knows, he's been here many times before us, and this is the first time I've run into this particular due process issue being raised. So I want to hear her with you present, so you can talk back and forth if you need to. And then the board will obviously, we'll do the quasi judicial thing we do, which is make up our own minds as well as we can, given what has been presented to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that.
But if you need to say more, I'd rather have you wait until Lisa gets here, because I know you'll need to you both need to be on the same page if we're to understand what the argument is about.
That seems appropriate to me, sir.
Okay, thank you. I have a feeling we are going to have supper a little later than you. This week's gonna make.
Yeah, I had made a phone call.
Oh,
Tracy with Tulsa County Assessors. I made a phone call upstairs, 3 of them. I got a hold of one person that is looking for Lisa right now, so just bear for a few moments.
okay,
And
we'll do that. If it goes on too much longer, I'm gonna table this.
I understand.
don't want to deal with the first telephone thing, but I'm sorry. I know all of us, we're not wanting to linger here any longer than we have to today. But let's give her 3 or 4 minutes anyway, to try to see if we can find her.
right, yeah,
Because
so
I'd rather deal with the problem.
Well, my daughter has a ballet recital this evening, so I'm sure I'm not the only one with plans.
Talk about pressure.
We'll get you there. Nobody should have this. A ballet recital.
Now, it says a 5th grader, 4th grader.
She's actually 16 and trying to become professional, so.
Wow,
it's-
excellent, excellent. That's an exciting, challenging career. My previous existence was in theater.
Huh?
I know how challenging performing arts careers are.
Mine too, I'm an auditor.
This close.
Arguably, that's my current profession.
Are you?
Arguably. Some people would not refer to it that long.
I gotta pour myself some more coffee. How about you? I'm fine.
Gosh.
No.
So are you gonna turn here in town?
I'm from Edmond. I practice primarily in the metro area. I do get out there, so I practice. Judge Nightingale sometimes up there.
Son, all this.
Oh, really? I consider all this. My previous life was a police officer, so I know, I went from the profession people don't like to one they hate.
Say.
I know, but I don't do criminal. I worked too hard in law school. I actually didn't do the tallest. Didn't make sense. Good firm, excellent.
Takes care of you.
Be an attorney to be a
I'm
police
sorry?
officer.
It takes care of you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, find the balance, the taking care of persons or the taking care of the being present, that's.
How was you on before?
I did.
Okay.
Oh, before what? Oh, Marine.
Yeah.
There goes 10. Is he also trying to run her down?
I don't know. He was
have you
stepping
been
down
watching
pretty.
it on the
Oh, yes.
YouTube channel? John? Ken Grass was, no, but I did contact John Wright.
Okay.
He's our assessor.
So I'm sorry, but I just know we go any further on this. So unusual for us to have it. I mean, you know, she asked me, could she leave? And I would have said yes, because it's so unusual for us to have to do it.
I almost said something. I wish I would not. I thought maybe she might be coming right back or something. I was actually pleased to see those concerns.
Perhaps we should go on to the next one.
You think we should do the first telephone?
She may need a minute to get up to speed on what's going on.
Yeah,
And that might give us an opportunity. I'm happy to confer with her and see if we can.
okay, why don't we do that? What I'm doing is I will move as chair to table our protest item 1392, so later in today's agenda.
And Lisa is coming in right now.
There she comes.
So they should have it had it second.
needed to get up to speed.
that we called you back so suddenly, but what has happened is that in our next appeal is represented by counsel who has introduced himself to us, and he's raising a interpretation of the process by which the assessor presents material to the board. So I'm at a loss. Now, he just made us, I'm gonna listen to him go so far, and then I said, if I'm gonna deal with this, I've got to see if I can get our lawyer, the assessor's lawyer back. He's just made a suggestion that might work to save us all time, which is to let you two go somewhere and conference and then come back. Is that?
I don't object to that on the legal issue or on the
On-
settlement.
On the legal
It's
issue.
on the
And
legal
I,
issue.
my understanding is, that, now I could be wrong, and I can state it succinctly. And I think counsel for the assessor's office would probably jump on pretty quick. And that is, my objection is based on the fact that the assessor's office has not satisfied the requirements of 2876, specifically that on receipt of notice of the appeal of the County Board of Equalization by the taxpayer, the county assessor shall provide the County Board of Equalization with all information submitted by the taxpayer, data supporting the dispute evaluation, and a written explanation of the results of the informal hearing. My understanding is that the assessor's office did not do that, did not provide that, or does not provide that.
That's correct. It's not been our practice here in Tulsa County.
And I would, my position is that that's a due process requirement, and that in at least in other counties, and the short version, and I think you'll recognize the mirror, is that when that is not provided, that the assessor's office is not able to then produce evidence or to the board at the hearing. And they cross-examine our information, but they may not provide their own fresh, unreviewed, without the board or the opposing party having an opportunity to look at that.
I would object to that, and I would ask if you're wanting our office to be responsible, was there not, if I may, was there not a formal protest submitted to the Board of Equalization's secretary or to the county clerk's office with all of their information?
Yes, and they sent in whatever beforehand, and we sent their information to the board before the meeting.
Is that in addition to what you gave to our office at the informal protest?
It is not, it's the same. And so,
So you're objecting to the fact that we didn't give something that you've already turned over?
no, I'm not. I'm objecting to the fact that you provided only that and not your supporting information and the written basis for your decision.
I passed it
At what point?
That's
2
what
weeks
she's
ago,
here
last
to
week,
do.
and I have it printed out in front of me, and I'm happy to give them printouts of it as well.
But what
It's been with them.
he's, I may be wrong about, but you'll get the statement. What you're doing is at the hearing presenting that information. As I understood his objection is that we were supposed to have that already, that we should have reviewed.
I
that.
submitted it, but that's
No,
okay.
But the clerk's understanding is.
But
we're
according
forbidden
to the
do it.
affidavit,
Yeah.
we have been directed not to give the information
See, So
beforehand.
we've never, ever gotten.
Well, that affidavit, and I would argue that affidavit is an open records requirement. So it is consistent with the requirement that, and just keeping this in layman's terms, that a judge not have discussions with a party, ex parte, thank you, right? I mean, it's ex parte discussions is one party but not the other, right?
Correct.
And I believe that that's the 2877 requirement. It is not that they have our basis for appeal, but neither they nor we have your basis, because that's the equivalent of walking into a courtroom with, and I believe that's the reason you find it in every other county. They provide that information as required immediately to the board, and they also provide that, then the board in turn provides that information to the taxpayer. And
That's a concern that we would ask. I think there are other board meetings available. We would ask for the board's consideration to pass this hearing, to allow us to comply with that to your satisfaction.
we would not object. I think that's appropriate.
Okay, where did we end up there? I missed.
We would ask the board's permission to move this particular hearing on this appeal to a date in the future,
Okay,
date that's available, so that we could submit the documentation that would be given to the taxpayer.
I think that's appropriate. That's the remedy that we're seeking. So
Okay.
I believe that's appropriate.
as chairman, I will make a motion, but I am going to ask for a vote from my board to support this. I'm moving that we shall table this matter to a subsequent meeting of this board that is called and placed on our agenda. Is there a second to my motion?
I'll second, but, will the information be presented to us for in-depth reading? I'm an accountant.
That's the purpose of the statute. The purpose, I mean, so I would argue that is the purpose of the statute that, and I mentioned earlier, this being a quasi judicial proceeding. And so that, we find the counterparts frequently in procedure in Title 12. And so both parties normally would present all their exhibits, their witnesses, their information, a brief. That information is available to both sides and the court prior to to a hearing or the beginning of a trial. And I would argue that that's the due process violation that is occurring here by not providing that information. So does that make sense?
Yes, it's my understanding that information has been provided to the secretary. It's just that you have not received it or your client,
They haven't received it.
because they can't look at it.
Okay,
and they can look at
And
it.
that's a
right?
particular, that's up to the assistant district attorney to advise the county clerk's office and the Board of Equalization about that. And so that will be something that can be submitted to the assistant DA.
So then I would expect, and that's where I'm a little surprised that there's not an ADA here. Because there isn't a lot of board meetings.
It's not usual.
But I mean, I think it's pretty clear that 2877, sorry, 2877 does deal with the extra.
but does it satisfy your need today and your client that we're putting it forward to another meeting? Otherwise, I need to go on. In other words, I'm not opposing this discussion. I think it needs to happen, but where it comes back to the board so that it comes into the board. So we
Well-
can't make a decision about it today.
So what you're saying though is that that's a policy position taken by the board, not by the assessor's office. Is that correct? So you're providing, I just want to be clear, your position is that you're providing everything to the secretary under the requirements of 2876 that you're supposed to provide, and that she in turn is turning around, is not giving that to the board members, because as she's reading 2877, she's not allowed to do that. Is that correct?
The statute on the affidavit.
Okay, and I would ask, so then we get to, I would ask that someone from your office, because it's not left to us.
See the business card?
No.
If not,
Right?
Do you have one? Or I'll tell you what,
We have paper.
I apologize.
the board has already voted to.
We have not voted yet. I was getting.
Not taking roll call.
That's right. We have not voted. We just have made a procedural motion.
Are we setting a precedence here? This is,
No, all we're doing is pushing it. I mean, we do this with agenda items all the time where we say, something comes up and we say, well, we can't deal with that. We're gonna
and they're
deal with it later.
residing outside.
Well, they can do anything they want. It still has to come back to us in an open.
At a later date.
At a
We're
later
deferring
date.
it.
Is all we're doing is deferring decision. We're tabling the matter. Now, if you have, I mean, Ruth, your question perfectly appropriate. But I was doing that, but you guys don't feel good about this. Tell me.
I'm just asking if you want us to have the information from the assessor's office when we come into this.
I
Is that what
have,
he's asking?
that's what he wants. I have no opinion. I'm gonna count on the assistant district attorney to work with the clerk's office and the assessor's office to figure this out legally with him.
Okay.
That's all.
Sure.
That's all I'm trying to do.
I think that's a satisfactory result. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Defense. We still need to vote. I'm going to call, we will take a vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchum,
Yes,
Ms. Vanderwall,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
we have ordered that this matter be put on our agenda in a subsequent meeting at this term.
Thank you.
Don't write it.
I'm
Don't write on that.
Oh, no. I didn't. Hang on.
Because we always say that's for later.
Sure. All right.
So,
We are now down to telephone review. My
Yeah.
favorite things to do. Okay. Let me simply say that the next agenda is 1384 Store Master Funding, the third LLC. It is the first of our telephone reviews. And what are these three all together? Is that what you gave them, all three of them, or three of these?
Which three are we talking?
We're just doing one at a time, the
Okay.
one I just called, but she's talking about the tax rep.
1380.
We're back on Store Master Funding, the third LLC. Is this Mr. Jake Wyman?
It sure is.
Well, this is Ed Catchell. I chair the Equalization Board for Tulsa County. I'm here with my two colleagues, Charles Vanderwilling and Ruth Gaines, and we are getting prepared now to hear your appeal. And what I do is I read what I've got in writing in front of me that you have submitted. And then I will give you an opportunity to add anything you wish to it. And then after that, of course, we'll give the tax assessor staff to a chance to speak to this appeal before we make a decision. Is the procedure clear? Mr. Wyman?
Yes,
Is the procedure clear then?
yes. I'm sorry, Charles Ruth, and who's the third member?
Ruth Gaines is her name.
And who is the third? I've got Charles Ruth and who?
I'm Ted Catchell. I chair the board.
Ted, okay. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't hear you at the beginning. Everything's clear now.
That's fine, not a problem. Okay, I was just reading that this is on our agenda, the Store Master Funding, the third LLC. The property is listed at 11015 East 51st Street here in Tulsa. Previously, it was on for $6,872,000. The assessor is proposing to leave that assessment unchanged for this year. In your appeal, it says that you believe it should be reduced to a correct value of $6,184,800 for the following reasons. The property is less valuable this year than it was last year. There are no new sales comps, as there weren't any sales comparisons from last year to support this assessment. Big box retail demand is down again because of the increase in online e-commerce. Costs, equity, and income support a lower assessment than the $6,872,000. We're do have in front of us a television monitor that shows us an aerial view of your property, and I think also another photograph that I can't quite figure out. Could you, there it is. But what is the name of this big box store? Mr. Wyman?
This is an at-home location, formerly a Garden Ridge.
Okay. Yeah, I remember now.
Okay.
Okay, I read into the record what you submitted to us, but please feel free to add what you want or to walk us through any of the additional documentation you provided with your formal application.
Sure, and thanks for the time, Ted. So the story of, as everyone's well aware of what's going on with how everything is switching to online e-commerce, everyone wants something, they want it on their door, 1 hour later. So the demand for big box retail like this isn't what it once was. And as we've seen historically, like retail always kind of creeps up. Well, over the past 3 to 5 years, big box retail like this is doing the opposite. So the fact that this property is still sitting at the same assessment as it was last year is almost like it's taking an increase because there aren't sales, there aren't income, and there isn't a cost to support what this property is actually worth. If this property, again, At Home almost went bankrupt like 12 months ago. And unfortunately, they were able to make it through. Their stock price plummeted. I mean, everything plummeted down to the point of where they were $4 and they were looking at just literally they're having to close doors because they were losing more money than they were making. So the business model is not working right now. And we can agree that e-commerce, the business model is working. So my point of this is big box retail like this store are not as valuable as they once were. This is 3 years in a row where this trend has continued. So this location in particular, being in between two highways, is kind of a quirky thing to get to between 51st and Garnett. Like it's not very accessible right off the highway. It's kind of a quirky location. So it's another thing that kind of adds to the reasons this building should not be assessed at $6.87 million. You did read in my 6.184 value, which the way we determined that was that we thought the property was 10% less valuable this year than it was last year. We talked with the ownership about it, and we've revised our offer to a number of 6.390960 so that we can try and find a more of a middle ground between where the assessor is at and where we're at.
Okay.
What is the revised request?
Yeah, what was your revised number? I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it's $6,390,960.
So you went up a little bit in your
Yes.
request.
We decided we wanted to work with the CAD just to show that we're not being too stubborn about everything, but we do want to be acknowledged that this property is not doing very well. And yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask the assessor staff to come and express the viewpoint of the office about this particular property before the board. Please identify yourself for the record.
I'm Clark Sherman. I'm the appraiser of the Tulsa County Assessor's Office.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Afternoon, Clark.
Hey, Jake, how are you doing?
Good, sir.
I think you guys may have these already.
No, we don't have those. Don't think so. There you go. Thanks.
There you go.
What does this property used to be?
Garden Ridge.
Garden Ridge, okay, thanks.
Okay, here on the presentation I got for you, there's some brief overview of the property. Kind of Jake's touched on a lot of this stuff. Its current value, 172,000. It's 141,284 square feet. Constructed in 1996, and it sets currently on 12.4 acres. It's currently valued on the sale price from when Garden Ridge acquired it in 2014. We on page 2, if you want to look there.
Sure.
We have an income approach. This is how we came to our value on it. Basically took the information that Jake gave me on it from the rent roll, like that kind of stuff, and I adjusted for the expenses. The information I received at 30% didn't seem to mesh with what a triple net lease would be. So we basically adjusted that, and I did allow for any type of distress caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And then that came up to a price of $7,053,790 or $49.93 per square foot if you do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, how did you factor the COVID in?
I allowed for a higher expense and a high cap rate as well. I lowered.
Hey, Clark, what'd you change your cap rate to, Clark?
I kept the same one actually on it, 9.5.
Okay.
And between that and the sale price, which is, that the income came up a little higher than what we had at value, 7 million. And then I also I found some comparable properties, probably not all apples to apples here, but they're all big box type of discount warehouse type stores. And in that, when comparing it to those, total value, it came in the median range. It's at 6.8. These all range from 6.1 up to, there was one that's 20, but that's quite a bit bigger building too. So, and then they were all higher in square foot, price per square foot. Our item at our value, it came in at 48.64 per square foot, which is at the low end of the spectrum on that. If you see on the comparable properties on the bottom of page 2, I did the bottom line. There is also an at-home store in Oklahoma City that's virtually identical to this one. I have a picture of it on the 3rd page. That's the identical square footage. It was built 1 year earlier, and it's also acquired at the same time with when Garden Ridge was bought out by At Home, and it's slightly more valuable at 7.2 million, 334,187. So it's slightly over, not exactly an exact comp, slightly different marketplace, but it is in Oklahoma, and it's the identical store too.
You guys have thrown out way in the past of comparing Tulsa to Oklahoma. I think that's not a very good comparison because you're talking about way different land. That is on a third of the land that the one in Tulsa is at. This one in Tulsa is a massive setup. So I don't think that those are comparable. And you said that your sale is based on the 2014 sale. That's 8 years ago. That is not a good basis for value. It's something that happened 8 years ago when a property was being purchased because of a failing company. Garden Ridge was literally going to bankruptcy. I don't think that that's a very good basis for that. And then income, Clark and I had talked about that. And as you stated, the cap rate was adjusted to, trying to adjust for the fact that this store was closed for 3 months and then was at 50% capacity. Well, the issue is still, in fact, that it's an ongoing concern, and that the COVID factor, it can't really be quantified just to this assessment cycle. So the rents, the expenses, all of these things are still in flux at this time, rather than them being a determined thing, because COVID is still, while things are trending in the proper direction, it's still very pertinent, and this is 6 months after the assessment cycle. So that shows that the market has still not responded, and the risk and the demand for property like this just doesn't exist. There still isn't leases like this happening. There aren't sales for properties like this. All of those things right there are not proper comparisons, in my opinion.
I wanted to hear Clark's final number. What was your, you weren't proposing to increase it?
No, I just wanted to, keep the current value is all I recommended without doing any further looking into it.
Okay.
I would like to address Jake's concerns about the company being distressed.
Okay.
They have expanded to 9 more stores in the last 2 months, including another one in Oklahoma City. And per Bloomberg reports that was in Dallas Morning News on May the 6th, they had sales that were 27% higher in 2020 than they did 2019. So doesn't look like this is a type of situation where the taxpayers have trouble picking up any of their rent on it or anything like that.
Their sales were up 20% because they were down 40% the year before from the issues of retail. Retail's been on the down and down. Also, the 27 stores that'll be opening, those are proposed. I get the pipeline every single year, and those properties, At Home hasn't opened or even started a new location in over 14 months. I have all the information to back that, so
I was,
that is incorrect, unfortunately.
I was under the impression that the one in Oklahoma City opened in March.
It might be in development phase, but we have not had a new store open in over 14 months.
Okay, it seems to me we're a little closer than the argument allows. You're essentially wanting 6.4 and they're asking for almost 6.9. So we've got about a $500,000 difference here today. Is that a kind of rough horseback estimate?
Yeah, and we came up because we want to be fair. You know, I know 6.1 is an aggressive number, but at the end of the day, I mean, these properties just aren't selling. So outside of the income, I don't understand where the 6.8 value is. For this submarket in Tulsa, almost Broken Bow, I mean, Broken Arrow, I don't understand where 6.8, if somebody went and bought that property today, they're not spending that much money on it.
Well, essentially, as I understand your position, as you're expressing it, is because of the lower income we're achieving, that we think we should have some adjustment, but that's why you gave us the number that you gave on this one, right? So you're kind of saying treat Tulsa separately, whatever else these other this large commercial operation is doing in other locations shouldn't have that much impact on us here. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, okay. I think maybe a better, simpler way of saying that would be if this property had a price tag on it of 6.8 million this time last year, the property still is not sold. The property still has a price tag of 6.8 million. Do you think there's a reason that the property hadn't sold, or do you think the property has gained or held value in that time? Or do you think it's decreased in value over this past 12 months or 16 months?
Are you suggesting that this property's been on the market?
No, I'm not. I'm saying a hypothetical to reword what we were talking about right there. To describe the market for property like this, say 12 months ago compared to now, or even 24 months ago.
Well, I think even you are recognizing there isn't a whole lot of budge on this one here. And as I've said too many times, we have to stabilize property year after year. This isn't about us just responding. Retail stores, of course, are cyclical operations, and you're going to have good years and bad years, but the county has to go on stabilizing its tax base because the things we support with our taxes are not cyclical in the main. They are cost and cost increase year after year. I think your offer is pretty generous. I'm willing to give him a little here, but I'll have to hear the other members of my board ask their questions. But he's asking for a slight, or not, I mean, it's not insignificant reduction, but us to 6.4 as opposed to 6.9 that it's roughly on. Charles, do you have other questions, though, you should be looking at? It just seems to me all we're struggling with here is an income dip, but we can't give much for that.
No, right down the middle.
But what number did you have in mind?
Anywhere in the 6.5 plus or minus.
Okay, 6.5. What about you, Ruth? Are you willing to go along with Charles and I to try and give him a little here this year, but not much?
I had written down 6.5.
You wrote 6.5. One of you move it. I think that's the base we're going to do on this property for you today, Jay. Okay?
That's fine, guys. I appreciate it.
Sure. One of you move that motion and second it, please.
I move that we set the fair market value at $6,500,000.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote to adjust the fair market value to 6.5 as the roll is called.
Dr. Catchell,
Yes.
Ms. King,
Yes.
Mr. Vanderwill.
Yes.
So ordered by action of the board today. all that somewhat unholy silence, Jake, is just me trying to write things down. on a piece of paper.
I like your characterization. I appreciate that.
We're moving on. I think you have a couple more of our agenda today, right?
No, I think Clark and I, or I can't remember if it was Clark and I, but we took care of our other case last week. So I think we were good to go today, guys.
Oh, okay. Well, good to talk, and I hope you have a
Is
pleasant.
that correct, Clark? Did we took out Rakesh Aurora already, that cotton patch?
That's correct.
And what about the auction?
That one's not mine.
Okay.
Oh, but does he have?
Did you have one more, Jake? There was a.
Yeah, I didn't know if we ended up tacking that on or not. I never got full clarity. Are we gonna do Armstrong and 41st today?
Yes.
Yes, it's
Okay.
it's on our agenda, so why don't we shift to that one since he's on
We
the
want to do the
phone
one.
now? Do we have
Dr. Ketchel,
Yeah.
the next one is an agreement.
the next one is an agreement. That's always good news. Is this the one?
Is it?
Yep.
Aurora Family Trust?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you state what the agreement is, please?
Jake and I came to the agreement of 1.8 million.
1.8 million, okay, I will move that.
Second.
It's been moved and second to adjust the fair market value on this protest number 1385, which previously, its current market was to be 2,219,100. And now we have adjusted it down to the 1.8 by agreement. Will I so move? Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Ms.
We'll
Gaines
vote.
already.
Oh, she did? Did you move? Oh, sorry. Well, then.
No, you moved, I second.
Okay,
Okay, good enough.
just so the clerk is clear. Then we'll vote as the roll is called to adjust.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes.
Ms. Bidwell,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
This is the fair market value for this property at 1.8 million. And, all right, we're down, we're gonna skip, is that right, all the way to the end of our agenda today to pick up this one, Armstrong, 31st and Harvard, is that correct? Let me read it into the record and then we'll deal with it. This is protest number on your agenda board, 1416. It's listed at the very bottom of the agenda. It is a property at 4123 South Harvard Avenue. It was previously on for 6,306,600. And they were proposing to leave it at that number for this year. He says in his appeal, he believes it should be lowered to 6 million even. Most tenants were closed 2 to 3 months of the year, 50% capacity for 3 or more months due to COVID. Harvard Liquor was forced to vacate because they were unable to fulfill rental obligations. They left the LL with $185,000 of unrecoverable rental liabilities. Does that pretty much sum it up for your client, Mr. Wyman?
Yes, sir. And a lot of similar conversations that we talked about at home. It's just the industry is not doing fantastic. I took my 185 grand and I essentially just applied it as expenses. You know, there are more additional expenses on top of that, but I just took that as a way of equating the risk, unfortunately, of that tenant having to be shut out and having all of that liability left over. I felt my $6 million value was a pretty fair assessment. Just again, trying to help out the landlord with losing tenants and just kind of the general risk, unfortunately, right now of owning properties like this.
I noticed that last year, this property was at 6934. So we went down last year. Was that an action of the board or was this the assessor?
That was the Clint Vogt, Tulsa County Assessor's Office. Hey Jake, that was us.
That was, you took it down
Yeah,
last
we
year.
lowered it. The Assessor's Office lowered it
Okay.
due to COVID and that excess vacancy, especially that liquor store moving out. So we've kind of taken that into consideration at this point.
What about that, Ms. Wynand? Do you understand the assessors our assessor staff is informing the board they've already taken it into account the things you were presenting today?
Well, that would be the previous year. So like in my case, again, if we're looking at this as an investment type situation, do you think this property holds its value, say, this time last year, or do you think it's less valuable now that it's lost a tenant that was supposed to be there for 5, 10 years, and now there's $185,000 in liability? While I do agree that Clint has acknowledged, some of the risk and whatnot, there still isn't a demand for this type of property. So again, I think that we trended in the right direction last year, and I think the number 6 this year is still very fair and marketable. It's equitable with the market. I just don't think that there's a massive demand for property like this right now, kind of out at 41st and Harbor. Not saying anything about the area, but I just think there just isn't a massive demand for a small little pocket neighborhood like this.
Well, I'm not particularly trying to argue with your general assessment there. I agree, actually. But if they've already given you a $300,000 break, it seems to me that they're going a long ways to meeting your client's needs. I'm a little less inclined to take another $300,000 off of the tax roll.
There's no reduction this year that I'm aware of. I'm sorry, was it?
No, but I meant last year, they took you down, so they haven't, they left you with that reduction, is what I'm suggesting.
Sure, and yeah, because there's an ongoing issue of like demand for property like this. I mean, I understand your point of 2 years ago, but again, that's 2 years ago. And this shows that the property continues to struggle. So I think that would just drive home evidence that this is not doing as well as they would hope. And as the market, there just isn't a market for it, plain and simple. So when you have a property sit same value year over year, that's like taking an increase in a bad market. And this is a bad market for retail. And again, I just think 6 million is a very fair number. And I don't think that it is out of line with the market and keeping everything equitable.
Maybe I'm not understanding, and I should let the assessor staff speak here, and you can probably help me, but it seems to me that you're not saying they have gone down another hole this year. You presented that last year. The issue from my viewpoint is stabilization, not an argument over that suddenly the values increase. It just hasn't decreased is what I'm saying from a year.
Sure. Okay, you're right. Sorry, Ted. I guess I misunderstood your point there, but yeah, it's just not. It's continuing to trend in the wrong direction, and the assessment is not verifying that or trending with it.
Okay. Other members of the board, or do you want to hear from the assessor staff? I've been talking on here. I'd like to hear the assessor. Please.
Yeah, sure thing.
Just identify yourself so that we have you on the record.
Clint Vogt, Tulsa County Assessor's Office. I have a few packets for you.
Sure.
There you go.
Oh, Sprouts.
It's Sprouts and an adjacent little strip center there. That was where we were talking about the liquor store that are vacated.
Right, and they're the ones gone.
They're the ones that are gone. So if you'll just go to the first page, I think the protests and tax history will kind of clarify some of the confusion you're having. I'll just start from the beginning here. So in 2018, we were sitting at 7.4 million. The agent that year had protested, requested 5.3, we had denied it. In 2019, they protested again requesting 6 million that year. We had adjusted it down to the 6.9. During the 2020 tax year field work, another appraiser had gone through and valued this property at 8.2 million based on work done in a stabilized income approach. That was then appealed again. The agent requested 6.5 million in that 2020 informal, and we adjusted back down to the 6.9 million. Again, during 2021 field work, another appraiser had lowered it to 6.3 million, which is where we're at now, Jake. That's kind of what they were saying, is that we've gone down.
Gotcha.
During the year, that was just during field work. That wasn't because you guys protested. That was us acknowledging that there's some vacancy and lowering it based on that. And that was
Gotcha. Okay.
based on that vacancy and COVID conditions and more risk. And then this year, the agent requested that $6 million figure. It was denied based on our market income approach, the actual NOI we received. And that's kind of where we are in terms of the value history. So moving on, I just want to touch base on all the approaches to value here. So our cost analysis, we're coming in, our gross building area cost analysis comes in at 8 million. If you adjusted for the net rentable square footage, we're getting 7.8 million on this, or $235 a square foot. If you go to the next page, move on to some of our income analysis. So our current income, we are using $20 a square foot rent for both Sprouts and the Market Strip. 5% vacancy on the Sprouts, 10% expenses on the Sprouts, and an 8.75 cap. On the Strip Center, we use 17% vacancy, 10% expenses, and 8.75% on the cap. The expenses, these are typically triple net, so they're a little bit higher than what you're gonna get. We would typically do like 6% on a true triple net. 10% is not giving them a ton though. The cap rate is at 8.75%. That's pretty conservative. I'll show you some cap rates later, but that's just kind of capturing some of the risk involved right now, especially with COVID. My second income analysis down here is using their actuals, which I won't say any of those out loud. I know we don't want to put that out there into the airways, but I use their actual rent dollar per square foot that I was given by the taxpayer, the actual vacancies, which is 7.33% with that liquor store moved out. I included their reimbursements and I used their actual expenses. So there's not a percentage of expenses, but we're using what they actually are paying in expenses. And at an 8.75% cap, I'm looking at a value of 7.8 million, or again, $235 a square foot. Moving on to the next page, at the top, I have an income analysis. Again, this is just using straight up the 2020 NOI I received from them. And you can see I have different cap rates there, which will then show you different values for those cap rates. Using a very conservative cap rate of 9% on their actual NOI and highlighted in green, you can see that would give us a 7.8 million value. To get down to the 6 million value using their actual NOI down here in red, you have to use an 11.5 or 12% cap rate, which is very high for this type of property. Right below that, there's some CoStar 2020 fourth quarter cap rates for Midtown Tulsa and Tulsa in general. You can see they're hovering around 8.5, 8%, and that's just for all properties in general. Down at the bottom, I just have a Sprouts that had sold, I believe, I should have written it down. I think it was in 2018, this Sprouts sold for 9.42 million. Very similar square footage, very similar build. That came out to $350 a square foot at a 6.3 cap. And that is what we have it on for in the county right now. Just a reminder, our subject is currently valued at 6.3 million, $190 a square foot at an 8.75% cap. Going on to the final page, just my value conclusion. So our current income approach is coming in at that 6.3 million or $190 a square foot. An income approach using their actuals would give us $235 a square foot. Market approach using that $350 a square foot that the other Sprouts sold for on this Sprouts would give us 11.5 million. A cost approach is coming in at 7.8 million, $235 a square foot. Based on this data, my best assessment for the property stabilized would be $235 a square foot. For this year, I just want to sustain the value.
So from your viewpoint, you're giving them about $1.5 million lower than what your actual.
I think, yes, as a stabilized property, that I would put it about that $235 a square foot range.
All right, so certainly the discount for the code a year ago, what you're doing is just stabilizing that this year.
Right.
Okay. Other questions, other board members? Charles, you heard Clint go through this rather complete numerical analysis. But
Philosophically, how are you adjusting for our code? Are you backing up and starting over in effect? Got to recapture that?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand.
In other
your
words,
question.
got to have a base point.
Right,
Okay, and COVID screwed that up.
yes.
So once we do it, do we go back to the base point pre-COVID?
That is the goal, is to
Okay.
most likely will be slowly raising this, keeping an eye on what retail's doing, seeing if the property is able to refill those spaces. For instance, I already know I received, as of January 1st of this year, that liquor store was 3,600 square feet. It got split up and now there is a 1,200 square feet of that is now a hearing,
This one?
like a hearing aid store or something like that. So you can see we're slowly getting back to where we need to be, and I think we're in a pretty generous spot for this
They-
property.
that-
Yeah, go
Clint
ahead.
is correct, that there is a small spot, but they came in at literally half of what the rent is. They're in there at $10 a foot.
I have
So-
$20 a square foot on what you gave me.
That's right, and that's, so and you're exactly right, Clint, I don't have, I have not been able to get documentation, but they are on a sublease out from that liquor store, so they're not paying full. That is the role from what Harvard Liquor had been paying, and so they have to internally keep that that's what it is, because they haven't been able to account yet for that, the difference between Harvard Liquor and this new Hearing Alliance. The other thing, while that sale for the other Sprouts, again, that's 4 years ago, guys. That's a totally different market than what's going on in COVID right now. 2018, you're talking about a fantastic market for stuff like this. I mean, again, that's just simply 4 years ago. And $235 a foot on cost, that's similar to what people pay for Class A buildings. I mean, that's extremely, extremely high. So for retail that has brick veneer on the outside and, Class B type finish out for retail property, I just want you to know that $235 a foot is what Class A office building costs to build here in Dallas. So, while Clinton has good evidence and everything like that, there are that Hearing Alliance is in there at half the rate of what everything else is at. That sale is not marketable or considered relevant to what's going on right now. And the income is being drastically affected because of the risk right now of people. I mean, it's just, there aren't sales and there aren't comps right now because people are afraid to move into retail complexes. It's just plain and simple as that is. So I just wanted to comment on some of the evidence.
Okay, I'm still inclined to, as I said before, to stabilize this, and therefore just to sustain it because they took it down last year to where I think it is appropriate. But Charles, you asked the question, there's some of those numbers that stood out for you that we should be considering that I'm missing.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, Ruth, did you have a question or comment before we try to decide?
I don't have a question. Well, the comment would be that I'm in agreement with you that it appears that some consideration has been given
Yeah.
at the 6,306,000.
All right, I think that's the best we can do for you is to simply say we're stabilizing it for another year at 6,306,600. I shall move that we vote to sustain this current value at that number. Is there a second?
Second motion.
It's been moved and seconded to sustain. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Catchell,
Yes.
Ms. Van Wert,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
Yes, this is the fair market value to stabilize the property.
Anything else from me, or we good to go today?
Is that it?
That's all right, thanks. Thanks, guys.
Thank you
All the
very
rest of the
much.
season.
Thank you very much, Jake. Have a good evening.
All right, guys. You will. Thank you.
You want to turn him on, you just click it on. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We now have to go forward back to the top, right? And we've done that one and that one and that one. And we picked up the bottom. And this guy is there, he's doing both of these. Is that what you're saying, the telephone call?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is Jonathan.
Jonathan Sanders, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
This is Ted Catchell. I chair the Tulsa County Equalization Board. And I am joined in that by Charles Vanderwilly and Ruth Gaines, and we're here to hear the protest appeals that you are bringing before the county. Okay?
Good deal.
My understanding, and let me read what I have from you on this first property. It is 1393 on the protest agenda board. The SG Elms LLC Newark Knight. It is located at 8761 South Memorial Drive East here in Tulsa. It was on previously for $2,957,000. The county is proposing to leave it at that value. He is appealing to have it corrected to $2,804,131 for the following reasons. Similar properties in the market are valued less per square foot than the subject, thus making the property unequally assessed. Okay. Mr. Sanders, go ahead and explain your reasoning there about the unequalness of the assessment on this property.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. This property is a car wash. And so what I did is I took a look at other car washes in the area. And these are all relatively new built car washes, anywhere from 2011 up to 2019. And I looked at those on a per square foot, meaning the per square foot of the rentable building area, if you want to call it, but the per square foot value. And then I looked at it because I know each property is different. I recognized that there were some adjustments that needed to be made. So I adjusted each property based on their star rating, which you could qualify as a quality of the property. Their size, which is that square foot, and then also age. So anything that was newer would probably have a higher higher per square foot value, reasonably speaking. And I arrived at an adjusted value per square foot for each one of those comparable properties. And so when I look down the street and I see multiple car washes, they basically having them valued fairly and within reasonably close range. I mean, we're not talking about a big difference per square foot here. It's $30 per square foot when you look at the average. So that's the analysis that I went through when I looked at it, the assessment of each one of these properties. Once you make appropriate adjustments, would value this asset at like you stated for me, 2,804,131.
Okay. The only other thing I'm noting from the spreadsheet you prepared for us to look at here is you didn't talk about where the property was located. This one's out 8761st South Memorial, is that right?
That's correct.
And that would be a pretty good area for car wash. That's what we consider the South Tulsa market. And so that the square foot comparison, because of location, is more difficult to work out there, it seems to me. How have you tried to take that into your consideration of the value of these cars? Since, you know, obviously car wash is the kind of thing you drive by and you decide you want to do it. And that's pretty active location near 91st and Memorial.
Yeah, and I believe that's taken into consideration, partly with the star rating. Obviously, you're not going to put a A++ car wash or a car wash that is lower quality in a high, like you're stating, in a nice area or a high traffic. So that's part of it. Specifically address your question regarding the locational adjustment. I did not make a location adjustment, which would take into consideration specifically land and positioning of that parcel in a particular market.
Okay. I'm gonna let the assessor staff speak now, but the only other kind of question I have, maybe he can answer it for me, is about the star rating system. I wondered, how does that take location into consideration, or is it some other kind of thing?
I don't know what service he's using to come up with a star rating.
All right. Did you want to say anything about that rating? Because it seemed like those are pretty tightly grouped. You were talking about an A rating property. I was surprised that it shows Kenosha Avenue as a 2, whereas the one where you are talking about is a 3, whereas I would reverse those two if I was trying to talk about location, I think. But anyway, I'm not trying to make the whole thing about that. That was just a thing I noted. Let's let the Tulsa assessor talk about it, why he thinks this 2,957,000 is better, closer to what it's really worth.
Jeremy Watson, Tulsa County Assessor. When I was evaluating this property, I would have liked to have been able to take an income approach to it because it's a car wash. That's what you look at.
Sure.
None of the information for this property was available. So I really was not able to run any kind of income approach on it. I've included my own equitable comps. These are the car washes that are tunnel car washes, the same as this one here, with no other type of, there aren't self-service bays. There's not a detailing service along with it. It's you pull in, pull your car through, you come out the other end of the wash car. And the prices are kind of all over the place. The one highlighted in yellow is the property that we're talking about at the moment. But when we're talking about equity with this type of property, the market in Tulsa for these is changing. There are 6 that we're going to put on the roll for 2022. So these are being built. These are a desirable type of property to have, and you can tell because more are being built.
Sure.
And those are just 6 that I know of. I haven't gone out looking for them yet this year. When I do, I wouldn't be surprised if I stumble across some more. The value on this one in particular of $2,957,000 that was set based on a sale in 2019, an arm's length sale. Given the information that we have, that seems to be the most solid way to set a value of this property.
Yeah, that tends to be the way they bring them to us most of the time before the board. If they've got a recent sale, that's what they pick, since they think, arm's length sale should set a property. But the other piece of information, about the fact that they're looking at 6 new ones going into the market somewhere is also important. Anyway, I'm inclined to sustain this value, but I'm gonna give my other board members a chance to ask any question or raise comments, please.
I assume there's a willing buyer, willing seller in here.
For that sale, I looked back at the sales affidavit, that everything about that sale had willing seller, willing buyer.
And that's at the 2 million.
Yes. And that was just for the land, for the real property, so land and improvement, that did not include FF&E.
Oh, okay.
Is that the way the FF&E normally not included here? It's just real estate, I guess.
Correct, correct. And they do have a personal property rendition separate from our real property rendition, so that's all addressed separately.
Yes, sure. Ruth, did you have a question or comment about this, drive-through car wash?
I'm looking at what the representative has given us, and he's asking 2609. And that's based on the average value of comps, is that correct?
Let's see here, I thought it was, that he simply wanted 2804, wasn't that big a reduction, but.
Okay, I see the 2804, he had, I'm looking at the first sheet. Sorry.
I see, okay, oh, the last page is what you're looking at, sure, no. That makes sense.
And the reasoning behind that, just in short.
He was just comparing it to other car wash, information that he was able to get and say, well, this one seems high for him. That's the reason I brought up the issue of location, because it seems to me that they're pretty, as businesses, they're pretty dependent on where they're located. And East 91st and Memorial, that's a high traffic, fairly wealthy area of Tulsa. They ought to enjoy getting their cars washed pretty often.
And if we look at this per square foot, the 29 is what per square foot? Is that in here? It is.
That is $573.95 a square foot.
And in some of the information, he's got what is 7188 South Memorial.
No, it's 90.
No, in one of the comparisons that the representative.
Didn't? I didn't know.
On this second sheet, he lists a lot of different options. And I'm looking at it on my phone. It's 7188 South Memorial. And it's coming in at 889.
That's interesting. Yeah, but it's quite a bit more than what you're saying.
Right, so based on that, I'm in agreement to sustain.
Okay. Make the motion, please, to sustain.
I move that we sustain the value at $2,957,000.
I'll second that motion. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes, to sustain.
Mr. Vanderwill,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
This is the fair market value for this particular car wash. The second property, as I understand, Mr. Sanders, that you are here to represent is on our agenda as 1394 Seconodoa Enterprises LLC. Is that your understanding too?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me read what I have in writing in front of me, and then we'll give you a chance to talk about it. This property is located at 2300 West Kenosha in Broken Arrow. It's on for $4,100,000. He's appealing that it should be lowered to $2,609,721. Similar properties in the market are valued less per square foot than the subject, thus making the property unequally assessed. Is this what? Another car wash we're talking about here?
Yes, Chris.
Okay, go ahead, but I have a feeling it's gonna be same song, second verse, huh?
You're correct, sir. I won't belabor the fact. I'm looking at a similar comp set that I looked at the previous one that we just discussed.
Right.
The difference here is one's on Kenosha Street, down there at Broken Arrow. And, so the adjustments are a little bit different. This one just seems to be, the last one where you sustained it was at $574 a square foot. Same property, same developer. And this one is at $811 per square foot. Seems just way out of line to me. I'll just point your attention to one of the comparables there. The fourth one down on my list, which is just down the road, the same street, smaller property, built in the same year, also in Broken Arrow. It's at $465 a square foot. That's one of those that I think we take out. The location adjustment, in that instance, you wouldn't have to have one. And so when you look at an adjusted value of $465, that's less than what I'm asking for. But I just believe that this particular property, this asset is over-assessed on a value standpoint when you see it at $811 a square foot.
Okay, we're gonna listen to the tax assessor, but you certainly have an obvious point to make here since they're on the same street, probably about 1.5 miles from each other, aren't they? And it's the similar construction of the car wash, is that right? Looks the same in the picture.
Jeremy Watson, Tulsa County Assessor. Yeah, very similar type of car wash. Again, another tunnel car wash with vacuums. And it's only the tunnel car wash, no self-service bays, no detailing service. And it is at 71st and 145th or Kenosha. You're going to go with Broken Arrow street names.
Yeah.
There is a Walmart directly across the street from it. Sonic butts up right next against to it. It's a very high traffic area. Sure, a very high traffic area.
Tell me about this other property, the one that's also in Kenosha. Do you know where that?
I don't know which property he's talking about right offhand. So
Because it's at 3450 West.
And so I don't know, it may have self-service bays, there may be something different about it. I don't know right offhand to discuss it. So I'm going to refrain from discussing.
I understand. It was just, am I reading this right? You guys are on it. This one is, how much a square foot do you have?
This one is on at $811.24 a square foot.
That seems almost double what you got the other one on Kenosha. That was the reason I was curious.
This one was renovated in the last year or two. I don't know about the other one.
Sure, no, I understand. Lots of differences.
Sure.
But
And actually,
it still shows in his star rating system, whatever that is. That it's on for a 2 in contrast to the one we're.
and I don't know if that star rating system is taking into account renovations.
Yeah.
That were done.
No, I agree.
We could actually show, Tracy, if you wanted to show a picture from a prior year, you can see.
What a difference they
yes.
made. Yeah. Okay.
That's not a good one. There you go. So.
That's interesting. So they must be doing a good business.
Yeah.
If they've redone it.
So there was prior, so you can see they added the vacuums. They did quite a bit of renovations to it. But that notwithstanding, again, I would have liked to run an income approach on this still didn't have the information.
Yeah.
The value that is set based on a sale in 2019 that by all indications is an arm's length transaction.
Again, another recent sale. Yeah, it's tough to overlook, let's put it that way.
And with the way the market is growing for this type of property, for this type of business,
Sure.
I'm hesitant to make personally, I don't want to speak for the board, but I'm personally hesitant to make a change based on equitability when I don't know what equitable is going to be once the market is finished changing.
Yeah. You got to overhear what he was saying. I'm sure, Jonathan, if you have something you think we're ignoring, I try to look at the comparable of the other one on Kenosha.
Mm-hmm.
It is considered, as you point out in your spreadsheet, that's a lot less.
Right. Yeah, it is. And the appraiser pointed out, yeah, there has been some modifications to it. I mean, we're talking, if you stand probably in the middle of the road, you can see one of these from the other one. They both gain an influence from, the retail.
Sure.
Maybe a slighter adjustment because this one is across the street from a Walmart. I mean, we're at the next block down with that comparable. I just think that, regardless of the sale, because we don't actually know, I requested the information, but I haven't seen the closing documents. I believe there's probably some business value that was put into that. I know that the operation of this is closely associated with the developer. So that's one of those that I'm not gonna disparage the appraiser and the information we have because it is limited. I just look at it and the way the market is right now, it would indicate that there's a large disparity here.
The one thing I would like to draw the board's attention to, if we compare the property we just discussed to this property and look at the land value. The land value of the prior property is $450,000. The land value, which you can see in the picture, is not huge. We're not talking 40 acres here. $1.2 million. So a big part of this is just the land value itself.
Okay.
And then if you look at the improvement value, the improvement values are very comparable.
Yes, right. Okay, I think we're going to be inclined to sustain this one too. It seems like these are well located for the purposes of their business in both cases, and this one may even be in a somewhat better location. All right, is there other questions from other members of the board or comments, please?
Not that.
All right, then I'll move to sustain it at $4,100,000. Is there a second to my motion to sustain?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to sustain. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes.
Mr. Van Willen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
This is the fair market value for the property given its recent sales. We're done. Is he done?
yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. We'll hang up on you now. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, our next one is an agreement. And up next is Daniel Shepherd, the next three.
Okay.
Inclusive of the agreement. Do you want to do that with him on phone?
The agreement's not with me. I don't have an agreement with them.
I have one agreement.
Okay, mine's not an agreement.
So we.
What's the agenda order? Just look at it.
The 1395 we have as an agreement, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Do you want to deal with that before we make the phone call or with him on the line?
well, I suppose he should be on the line just so he confirms the agreement.
Okay. I can take both.
Okay.
And this was with the, okay, you got it.
Yes. 1395. We are getting ready to talk about an agreement on 1395.
Okay, here are the next three.
Still,
And let me get.
okay. And he has the rest of them,
No,
is
I
what
think
you're
it's
saying?
Daniel's fault with the bad weather because
Every year, whether, because usually he has to drive in the weather. This year he only had not driving.
Well, good for him.
Every year, yes, this is the Arkansas.
Yeah. Well, we could have a tornado for it. What they were saying earlier, yeah.
I think we're the only ones left in the building.
I think you're right.
We are.
This is Daniel.
Good morning, or you can tell I've been in, this is Ted Catchell, Daniel. Thank you for joining us via telephone. I hope everything is okay in Arkansas today.
Yeah, other than we're fixing to get some pretty bad storms like you guys.
Well, that's what I was saying. We might be looking at a tornado here. Okay, let me begin by reading into the record what we need. My understanding is this first one we may have an agreement on. This is the Tulsa Hotel Property LLC. Protest on agenda is 1395. Reading what I have in writing here in front of me. It says this is located at 616 West 7th Street in Tulsa. It was previously on for $13,471,500. After the informal, they lowered it to $11,520,000. And my understanding is that the assessor and you have come to an agreement. I'll ask the assessor staff to identify herself and tell me the agreement.
Yes, Tessia Davis, Tulsa County. Mr. Shepherd and I have settled on a value of $9 million even.
$9 million even. Is that your understanding? Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I move therefore by agreement that this property's fair market value is to be set by the board today at $9 million even. Is there a second? My motion. Second. It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote to adjust.
Dr. Catchell?
Yes.
Ms. Van Willis?
Yes.
Ms. Gaines?
Yes.
So ordered by action of the board, to reset the value at $9 million. All right. The next item on the agenda is number 1396. That is Tulsa Hotel Partners. It is located, get my paperwork here out. This one is located at 100 East 2nd Street in Tulsa. And it was on previously for $13,884,900. They're proposing to leave it there. He requests for his client that it be restated and corrected to $6,164,550 for the following reasons. This full-service hotel reported a 56% vacancy during the 2020 calendar year and a 48% drop in effective gross income. this substantial drop in revenue is obviously attributed to the COVID-19 epidemic. I have a sense, Daniel, this is going to be a continuing story here. Is that right?
You say continuing story?
Yeah, well, about the COVID-19 having this kind of impact on hotels.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a full service hotel goes, I mean, you can see, I've numbered the pages on my workups. I hope that
Sure.
you have one in front of you.
We do.
You know, you can skip through all the administrative paperwork and go to page 7.
Okay.
Page 7 pretty much tells the story of the income on this property. And, you know, you look at the 2019, 2018, you know, 17 and 16 years, you know, they're obviously, we look at the net operating income on these properties, and you can see that in 2020, you know, they lost almost $1 million, you know, 943,594. That's after, you know, backing out real estate tax and all these other items that we're not allowed to include. And so, you know, even the vacancy, you can follow it along. You know, it was 56% vacant in 2020 versus 32, you know, basically 30% vacant the other 4 years, which is pretty standard for full service hotels. Once it jumped up to the 56, I was actually surprised that it was 56% vacant throughout the year. Their average daily rate, if you look at the very top line above, you know, across from potential gross income, their average daily rate was right around $95 for 19, 18, and 17, and it falls down to $82.01 in 2020. And so, you know, this type of situation is tough for us and the assessor and the board, because, you know, who's to say in, you know, I guess from here on, from 2021, the summer of 21 to the end of this year, that hotels don't pick up with everyone getting vaccinated, people starting to travel for Memorial Day. And, you know, when you look at a calendar year that's so bad in income compared to what it had been, you know, how do you stabilize that income stream out? And so what I did was I used their 8201 in ADR, but instead of a 50% vacancy, I gave it 30. Instead of 109% operating expense, I gave it 85, and capped it out at a 10.5 plus effective, subtracted the business personal, and that's how we came up with the $6,000,001. You know, but what if it go, you know, say you give them a year relief? Well, what happens when they're right back up and the assessors are now, you know, they're handcuffed with the 5% cap, and so you know, that's kind of the issues that the assessor's office, Tessie and I have talked about, is that, you know, this pandemic is obviously something that nobody foresaw. Hotels and mom and pop restaurants took the brunt of it. And when we see the income, it's obviously reflective of that. You know, but I'm reading things now where, you know, hotel occupancy is slowly coming back. I would, you know, kind of go on a sidebar and say that the extended stay hotels, the Econo hotels that we represent, their numbers actually surprised me because they weren't as vacant as the full service hotels. And so the two of the three boards that I had this year were, you know, the DoubleTree and now the Hyatt Regency. The DoubleTree having about 413 rooms, and now this Hyatt having 453 rooms. They're both considered full service. You know, this one being built in 1978. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But, you know, from our client's perspective, they got a little bit of sticker shock getting the increase from 11,500,000, where it was at last year to the 13.8 this year, they're going, wait a minute, man. How can they increase it when our revenue is in the tank? So that's really their main points they wanted me to relate to the board. The 6 million valuation. Do I think that's just what the income shows? Is that fair to Tulsa County to lower it from, the 11.5 or the 13.8 to the 6.1 when it could be right back up? No, I don't think it is. And so, hopefully somewhere in between is the number. I mean, the DoubleTree ruling at 9 million was 21,583 a room, or not the ruling, but the settlement.
Yeah.
As far as comparables and how much these compare, that's really up to Tessia and she can tell you, but at that 21,583 a room for this type of deal, then you're looking at a valuation of about $9,777,000. So, I don't know what the answer is on it. I know that, we obviously want to be fair, and we're obviously just showing you what the income's producing. But we also realize that if it goes, back to a 30% stabilized, occupancy, then at that point, then Tulsa County is looking at 5% increases until it gets back to that. So we're just looking for something that, addresses the income fall off from the pandemic, and then, that's really all I have to say about it.
Well, I think you expressed pretty clearly the situation and the dilemma that we face in these kind of situations. I'm going to ask the assessor to express why she thinks we should just sustain what we had that they put on previously. You pointed out that it is an increase from where it was, I guess, last year. Am I understanding the situation? Because you're suggesting the 13,884, and last year on my green sheet, it looks like it was at, well, no, it was 13,161 last year. Is that right? Am I reading the right?
Looks like 11.
I'm down. It was 11.5 last year. So you guys have really added a couple of $1 million here to the hand, huh?
Yes.
Explain it all to me, the mystery of these numbers.
All right, I'm Tessia Davis, Tulsa County. Though I feel comfortable with the current value as it stands at 13.8 million, I'm asking the board to consider the value of $11,252,000 today as the fair market value for tax year 2021. I offered this as a settlement beforehand, so I would only feel it was fair to bring up that number as well.
Sure.
This was the most difficult property for me to value during this pandemic year. I valued every single hotel in Tulsa County this year with an income approach that makes concessions for COVID-19 through reduced occupancies and the elimination of income generated from additional amenities. However, when I ran the approach for this hotel, it kept coming in higher than the previous year's value, even with those concessions. So this suggested that this property was historically undervalued. And upon further inspection, it becomes clear that historically it has been undervalued because our office, since the beginning of RealWare at least, but so at least since 2008, we have not been able to secure rent rates or itemized income information for the restaurant, coffee shop, and spa on site, which are all independently leased through the Hyatt. So the value is really based on strictly the hotel and the room sales. So beyond that, we've never fully valued the income generated from the event spaces on site either. We just cannot secure that information from the owners. Nothing on Daniel, he's been very great to work with. There are 3 ballrooms and 4 meeting spaces that have just never been completely valued. Our system indicates that we've attempted to gain this information multiple times. And this has come to board, I think, the past couple of years, and every year we've just failed until now. I finally received some estimated rental information for the lease space. So this is why the value went up this year, even with occupancy suppressed and amenities reduced. I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard space with this property. If we look at property details, it becomes clear that this is one of Tulsa's most inclusive hotels when it comes to what they offer their patrons. So, restaurant, coffee shop, salon, gift shop, 3 ballrooms, 4 meeting spaces, a club lounge, a rooftop pool. It's really one of our fanciest, biggest, most loved hotels.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but if we go on to page 2, that's the breakdown of how I value hospitality-based properties in the wake of COVID. So every single hotel in Tulsa County was looked at regardless of the VI cycle. And like I said, this is the only hotel I was forced to, the market kind of forced me to increase while using this income approach that has COVID concessions built into it. So all income pro formas utilize no greater than a 50% occupancy rate. For this property, I used a 35% occupancy rate. And then a reduced range of cap rates was also used to showcase the reduced amenities offered. So it's a luxury hotel. It's certainly, in any other circumstance, this income approach that I've created would create about a 15 to 30% reduction in value. However, with the history of this property, I just could not find any wiggle room there. On page 3, it kind of puts things in perspective and highlights just how undervalued this property is in comparison to its luxury neighbors and even mid-scale neighbors in downtown Tulsa. So if we see the blue star on this page is the subject property, it's the Hyatt, and it's currently at the 13 million value that's currently on. The key price is $31,272 a room. Now, if we look at the new Hyatt there and the Tulsa Club, of course, their rates are going to be way higher. They're newer, but they do have very similar amenities. Actually, so the Tulsa Club has less amenities than the Hyatt, but they're way higher. But if we even just go to the Holiday Inn and the A-Loft in the same area, those are higher as well. And I don't think that there's a situation where a Hyatt with all of these amenities should really be valued under a Holiday Inn. So that is just food for thought. And then finally, on page 4, in the red box is my suggested value income breakdown, and that's for the $11,252,000 value that I attempted to settle on. I used an ADR of $80. That's lower than reported. That's at the lowest end of the market range. It's 35% occupancy. I use a 70% expense rate, which is a little bit higher than market. Though he did report 109% expenses, which is extremely high and cannot be supported by the market. And then I did not include in this breakdown any of the additional income from the spa, the restaurant, the coffee shop. That's just not included because I'm not really including that in other hotels this year. So I wouldn't necessarily feel it was fair for this hotel. Every other year we should have done that. But this year was kind of a weird year where, the restaurant was shut down, the spa was shut down. And then in the thin black box is kind of what I would value this property at without COVID concessions in mind and with the additional income. As you can see, so just kind of a non-COVID year, this property is coming up in a somewhat modest income approach with an occupancy of 50% at 23.7 million and a PPU of 53,000. So there's a big range here. Like I said, I'm very comfortable with the increase in value that I put on this property at 13,884,900. However, I did attempt to settle on the lowest range of my market parameters at 11,252,000.
Okay. Daniel, do you have questions or comments about what she has presented to the board and her recommended value of the 11,252?
Yeah, I presented that to these folks, and they weren't willing to accept that based on their numbers. I think a problem that you see in full service right now is what we call it's basically group demand. It's not really zero now, but when we talk about group demand, we're talking about groups that are looking to come to Tulsa and need a bunch of hotel rooms. Where do we want to stay? Do we want to stay downtown? Do we want to stay on the outskirts? Most of those groups haven't gotten together for really a year and a half now. And so I think once group demand comes back, then you'll start to see that vacancy improve. But as of right now, it just hasn't. And so we think it's coming, but obviously not until there's more vaccinations and people feel comfortable, staying in full service hotels again. Until then, it's going to be more of your transient, your Hampton Inns or, whatnot, maybe an embassy. But I've got to go to Tennessee next week for business. I'll be gone all week. And I'm looking for hotels that are easy to get in, easy to get out. I don't have to be in large groups. I've had one vaccination dose, but I haven't had my second yet. And so that's a worry for me. And I imagine that, people that travel for business like me are doing the same thing. And they're looking at what hotels to stay at. And obviously by their numbers, you can tell this hotel is people just aren't staying there like they have in the past. One thing I would like to point out, I didn't use 109% expense. Tessie had said that I'm reporting what income statements that they have given to me. I'm reporting those numbers. I stabilized the expenses at 85%. So I didn't use 109%. I used 85 on a stabilized pro forma, which you can see on page 7. Yeah. So, and that's like I said, after backing out real estate tax and all these other items, the income statements that are provided, Tessia she had asked for the rents on these other portions of the hotel, which I forwarded on, and then they sent me something back, and I immediately sent to her. And so as far as a history of this property and an appeal history, it didn't come to the board last year, but since 2011, it went to court in 2011, it went to the board this will be 6 years out of the last 10, not counting the court case. And so there is an extensive appeal history on this property given their income. And so on page 9 of my workup, it really starts on page 8 and page 9. The CoStar does real good about breaking out the Tulsa County Central Business District hotel occupancy. And so as far as if there are any other cases or whatnot, this report was pretty good. It gave me a good idea of 12-month occupancy for the market as a whole, plus an ADR of $90.79. So when I looked at all those things together, I thought, at $82 for an ADR, which is what we use, I didn't feel like that was out of line. And the rest of the graphs and everything else shows the downward trend that obviously started in 2020. I mean, everything just basically kind of nosedived from that $110 to $113 ADR average. Basically, now you're looking at 90, and it had gone all the way down to, about 85. And so that information we looked at was helpful, but we relied strictly on the income of the property, and that's really it. So the 11,250 was presented. I never got a response back, really. So I couldn't accept until they gave me the green light. But I still think that the 11,250, based on this year, that they thought it was too high. So that's really all I have.
Sure. Okay, as you said, the county's problem is that we go down anywhere close to yours, we're going to take 10 or 20 years to get back to where we were previously.
Yeah.
We just can't stay.
I mean, and so, with the assessment caps, to be fair, I mean, I obviously I'm like that, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place because, we want to be fair to all parties. And we want to come to an agreement.
Sure.
But at the same time, too, it's not fair to you guys to then say, it should be 6,000,001 and that's it, and that's all we'll consider. And then you've got, you're back to 70% occupancy next year, and it's 5% still, like you said, 10 years of increases to get back up to the number that it should be. And so, that's where we're trying to find a common value to make everybody happy. I mean, I understand this client's point, you know, I mean, when you look at their history, but also understood the points that Tessie was making as well. And I just, like I said, we, at this point, when the two sides can't come to an agreement, we throw it to the board. And like I said, I guess the main question I would have would be, what delineates or separates out the DoubleTree from the Hyatt, in your opinion?
Yes.
Tessie.
The 9 million settle, I mean, I don't have that information in front of me. I don't really want to speculate. They are somewhat similar. There are more rooms at the Hyatt Regency, and there's also just more amenities at the Hyatt Regency and higher quality amenities at the Hyatt Regency.
Okay.
But I mean, yes, they are similar.
Okay, I mean, I've got 453 rooms shown in the Hyatt. I've got 417 rooms in the DoubleTree. And I guess but I've only got the 1 year really of income on the DoubleTree. And it was pretty much the same song and dance. I mean, it was, negative NOI. They had actually lost $1.4 million versus the 900,000 figure that the Tulsa Hyatt had lost. And so I was just trying to get an idea of the comparable between now having a hotel, the DoubleTree at $21,583 a unit versus the Tulsa Hyatt that's currently appraised, I believe, and I'm taking the 13,884,000 number. That's 30,651 a room. And so if you say 11,250,000, then you're looking at a value of 24,834 a room.
Yes, I'm inclined to come down, but obviously 6 million is out of the question in my mind. I want to give other board members a chance, but my own number that I'm moving towards might be a little less than what the assessor's staff is asking for, but not much. I'd be probably around 10.5. But what are others thinking on the board right now?
One question for Daniel, the 11,250,000 that you put out early in your conversation, was there any seemingly agreement on that?
No, sir. No, sir, there wasn't. Like I said, I presented that to this group immediately after Tessia submitted it to me by email, and there was no response back. I mean, they're looking at it like, no. I mean, 11,250 was, too high. And another thing too, I mean, it's been at 11,500,000 since 2016. And so, from their standpoint, they didn't agree with the value at 11.5 all these years. That's why it's been appealed every year since 2016. And so, I knew that with their numbers the way that they were, that at 11,250 that they weren't gonna take it, but I still submitted it. And they said.
What about your number, Charles? Were you floating a number in your head somewhere? Not that I'm opposed to what she has presented. I think she's trying to come up with a number that fits her figuring, but.
Well, I'm hesitant coming out of COVID and going from 11.5 to 13.8. That bothered me.
Sure.
So somewhere in the 11.5 and 12. I don't.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to say, when I first looked at it and saw that it had jumped, I thought it gave me pause too. But when I look at the key numbers of the downtown hotel,
right,
to take it too far down, it's out of whack now, seemingly now. I was willing to sustain, go back to the 11.5 million, but since Tessia has indicated the 11,252.
Yeah, 11,252.
I would go with that.
Charles, you're the high man here. Explain yourself.
Just a feel, I suppose.
No.
What was your figure, Charles?
Literally, to go from 11.5 to 13.8 in the economy we've had, that doesn't feel right to me.
Just feels like it's chopping off too much.
It does.
Yeah.
And
Well,
she put
what-
11,250 on the table at
Yeah.
one time and didn't get a nibble.
No, they didn't, but I think, Dan is saying that they never have liked our number all the way back to 11.5. So no wonder they didn't nibble at 11.25 to that. Still. But anyway, he's representing his client. That's his job. Our job is to come up with what we see as equitable for both the client and the county.
13.8 is just a big number, what we've just come through.
Yeah. So suggest another number. We're both, that is Ruth and I are both close to, I think, taking what the assessor staff is offering. But you want to do more is my understanding.
I would say 13.
Really? Boy, you really are tough today.
Oops.
What do you think about, Ruth, what, you and I are either gonna have to bend over backwards to come up with Charles. It looks like somewhere, I don't know. Certainly 12 would be between where the assessor's staff, those willing to go down. I guess I'm gonna argue the old cop out here. The assessor's staff has spent a lot of time working this up, and she came up with 11, a very, very precise number. I'm willing to support it. I will vote to adjust to her number.
Is that the 11,250?
Yeah.
11,252.
11,252?
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to 2.
Okay. You're not the two though.
Tim taught me I'm supposed to come up with zeros, you know?
Well, thanks a lot, Tim.
They really don't add anything.
Can you clarify that motion?
We haven't
We haven't
made a
made it
motion yet. We're still arguing amongst ourselves, but I'm willing to make that motion. 11,250. Is that where we were?
11,253. Let's go up.
Tim's gonna get you out in a black,
That's
dark
okay.
alley somewhere.
It's rounded.
Let's round it.
Okay.
Round it up rather than.
Round it up or down. You wanna go to 5.5? Okay, I'll make a motion. I will say 11,255, 100,000. Is there a second to my motion?
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded to adjust this to 11,255,000 as the fair market value on this hotel property today as enacted by the board. We'll vote as the roll is called to adjust.
Dr. Ketchel,
Yes.
Mr. Vanderlei,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
And the final decision was 11,255,000. This is the fair market value by action of the board this day. Oh, okay. Dan, you're still up to bat, right?
Yeah, one more.
Okay, and this one is JDM 2 SF National LLC. And I've got it here in front of me now, State Farm, okay. This is located at 12222 State Farm Boulevard here in Tulsa. It was on previously for 29 million. And they're proposing to leave it at that. He's appealing and stating that he believes it should be corrected down to 25,870,575 for the following reasons. The property remains vacant. Per State Farm, no active sublease on the horizon. Taxpayer feels that a $14 a square foot rent or 289,909 of the net rentable area at market. All right. We've got your work up in front of us. Dan, you want to show us any particular thing you think this property is obviously?
Page 6 is really where it begins.
Okay.
Just kind of some of the known facts about the property, age, square footage, year built, things like that.
Yeah.
Kind of an aerial photo of the campus when it was full. This is one that I had some discussions with State Farm prior to the informal appeal when we, do our data request. And that's when the person my contact indicated that there really wasn't any activity on it. And so when you got an office this big and now you've got a population, a workforce that's moving to more of a remote type of work environment, they're starting to close down these larger office parks, basically campuses is what we call them. And they just announced they're closing the one in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. They're closing the one in Birmingham, Alabama. And they're all both really similar to this. They were all purchased back in the day for that sale leaseback price. And now they're going to be vacant. So they remain vacant. The reason this one was appealed again this year, it had gone in front of the board last year. And the board had lowered it from 30 million to 29 million.
Right.
The reason that it was appealed again this year was due to the fact that, according to State Farm, it's still vacant and there's no sublets on the horizon. And so with that, we moved our price per foot asking for our rent, our potential gross, from a $15 rate down to a $14 rate. Is it 12? Is it 13? Is it 10? We don't know. Is it going to be chopped up? And, a certain part of it gets this price per foot and a certain part of that price per foot. At this point, we haven't been given any indication that that's on the horizon, like I said. So the valuation that I came up with was based on a $14 a foot rent. I gave it a 15% vacancy, which I felt was market for the size of this property. I gave 40% expense, and it came right in around $89.25 a foot, which I believe if, when you look at the sales of offices this large, they, can range anywhere from a $60 a foot range all the way up to maybe $120 a foot range. So I felt like I was within a market sales. The problem that we have is finding sales of these type of properties. We just don't have any regionally right now. We've got them that have gone dark, but they haven't sold. And so we're waiting on these other campuses and these other jurisdictions like a Birmingham or just south of Nashville to sell. And then what they sell out on a price per square foot, then we'll have a better indicator. But I looked at it from a cost approach standpoint with another year's depreciation. The income that I ran came in higher than that. I went with the income. Like I said, I couldn't find any sales to justify a sales comparison approach. And so with that being said, the taxpayer is requesting a value of $25,873,575 or $89.25 a foot. If you need any further reasoning for why my evidence is back, on the following pages, one thing that I would, I guess, before I wrap it up on this one, if you go to, and I'm scrolling, if you go to page 18, page 18 is a summary of all the 17 properties in Tulsa that are coded offices and what their asking rents are for. And so you can go into page 18, I'm sorry, and you can see where you've got down below the map, there's a table and it lists certain things, but it's got available square footage, it's got, direct asking rents. And then on page 19, the property that's highlighted there is the State Farm, but you can see what these rents are going for and the corresponding square footages. So you've got a couple of larger offices, the one on South Boston. There's an asking rent of $16 a foot for it, but it's only 156,000 square feet. And so we kind of did the economy of scale argument where a little more, you're going to get a little bit less price per foot than, you start looking at the size of that State Farm building. That's why I lowered it to $14, which if you look at I'm going to probably butcher the name, but number 15, the Phil Cade building, 501 through 521 South Boston. It's got a little bit larger square footage at 363,000 available, but 454 total. 452,705 total, 363 available, and they're asking $14 a square foot for that one. So everything I was looking at showed me that, but keep in mind, I believe that's asking. And so everything was pointing me at about a $14 foot range. That's all I got.
Okay. Well, I know the board looked at this last year and tried to move it down a little bit because of the emptiness. And I guess the only question we really had, Dan, before I let the Tulsa assessor address it, is just, do you know what kind of marketing effort they made to try and sell this building, or are they just giving up?
Well, I mean, they're actively, trying to, like I said, get a sublet in it. And at this point, no bites. I asked them specifically for a listing if it's for sale. And the answer I got back from my contact at State Farm was no. So At this point, what I've been told is no, it's not for sale.
Okay. Because I would think if they're having this kind of experience, they would want to get aggressive in that area, but it's.
Well, this is part of the sale leaseback. This is kind of are the people you did a sale leaseback on this property, State Farm, and now, you're in the leaseback. But in the meantime, we decided, hey, office campuses don't fit the business model we want to, going forward.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's now been vacant here for 2 years. This is one of three that we have that we represent. So, I get both sides, but, I said, we're going to take all of that out and just go to what would be a reasonable, potential gross income. And I felt that $14 a foot at an 8% cap, to me, that seemed reasonable. If there's other sales of this type of property, you guys know of it, please let me have them, because I would love to know.
Sure.
But, for this type of property at $90 a foot, basically is what we're asking for. I didn't feel like that was out of the ballpark. It currently sits at $100 a foot, but, it is what it is. So.
Well, the board has been sympathetic, obviously, to their problem.
Correct.
Let's hear the assessors. They got their problems to deal with too.
Jeremy Watson,
Yes,
Tulsa
sir.
County Assessor. So in terms of State Farm was the tenant of this building. They owned it when they purchased the land, they built the building, then they sold it to the lease back, as Dan was discussing, in 2013. They entered into a 15-year guaranteed lease There's no indication that they have reneged on that lease. So that the property, as far as we can tell, is leased until 2028. That was indicated on the sales affidavit at the time it was sold. It was turned into our office. And then there's also a Tulsa World article from that time indicating that they have the lease until 2028. Just briefly going through my presentation, and really I put this together because I wanted to show you that I looked at all the approaches. I looked at the cost approach. It was built in 87, so we're kind of getting out of the range of really effectively talking about a cost approach. The income approach I ran was very close to what he ran. I find that $15 a square foot is more in line with this class of building. And there is a lot of square footage in this building, but it's also a very flexible building. It was built with the idea, it's got movable walls in it. You don't have to reframe and put up drywall. It's got metal panels. You lay the channel, you pop them up. You can have a whole new office setting within a week in there. It was actually built with the idea of more than one tenant in this office. And I know this because there's two lobbies in this building. There's an east lobby and a west lobby. There's room for additional parking if needed. So yes, it was a corporate campus, but it can be a whole lot of other things without a whole lot of cost to go into it. I looked at the market and like Dan was saying, there's not a lot of sales for this type of building. So just looking equitably, we do have a lot of offices that command that $15-ish rent. And I'm sorry, Dan.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I was just saying, we do have a lot of offices in Tulsa that command that, $14, $15, $16 square foot rent. And so if you compare it to those other offices, there are plenty of others that fall within the same price per square foot range. And then, as Mr. Catcher was saying, it was lowered $1 million last year. So when I looked at it, the income approach justifies the value. The market approach, it sits fine within the market. And then when I look at it, did it change any from last year to this year? It didn't, not a bit. It's still under lease. It's exactly the same. And so that's why I decided to sustain the value of $29 million.
Sure. Makes sense. I understand what you did. Other comments or questions by the board about this matter? Are we going to give them any more relief? They're asking for another 3 mil. They want to drop it down to around 26 as $14 a square foot. The county's holding on to the $15 a square foot in terms of this kind of office. Other than that, the situation really hadn't changed that much, right?
I mean, it hasn't changed. I don't see it coming out of it yet. No, I think it's.
Well, they've got 7 years to do it before that lease is up. They got 7 more years of that lease. So
is there any interest in it at all?
I don't know. I know that CBRE is advertising it for lease. As far as I can tell, not on the market for sale. But there are lease ads out there, but I don't know how aggressively it's being marketed. CBRE doesn't invite me to sit in on those meetings.
Sure.
So.
Well, Charles, where were you going with that? Were you trying to?
I would like to think, it's going to bloom again, but I don't think it is.
Okay.
So I think we're going to have to.
I mean, if we want to talk, it's across the street from Quick Trip, from their corporate campus, and they were always growing. I mean, they bought up other offices in the area. They bought up the MetLife building.
Yeah.
And
those
so
are different. I mean, this is a lot of flat ground out there. Their offices are.
Their openings literally match up across the street from each other.
Okay.
Like there's a stoplight, and you turn one direction, you go to the old State Farm building, turn the other direction, you go to Quick Trip.
I certainly see that when I have driven out that way.
And the State Farm building, it was built, it's perfect for call center type or IT type. There are channels that run under the floor for more cables than you can imagine.
But until we get an expansion of that kind of business, whatever that needs officers, a lot of officers, with what's happened to us this year, COVID-19 server, you don't get a sense that there's a lot of people out there getting ready to suddenly spring into needing a bunch of offices, right?
Well, this office is still under lease. And
Yeah,
there's
no,
still,
I think
the
that's-
property owner isn't
Yes.
losing any money off of
No,
it.
I get
So-
what you're saying.
Right.
I think that was why we did what we did last year. We were just kind of saying, well, you're still making money, but.
And that's what I looked at, this is what the board decided last year, and it's identical to it's in the identical situation it was last year when you decided 29 million.
What about, I think the reason we took it down a million last year was simply because we thought there was still the issue. I mean, the reason I asked the question is, Dan, I was asking that question about, were they aggressively marketing and trying to get rid of it? Obviously, they're pretty happy with the financial deal they must have with this lease, that they're not trying to sell it. Isn't that right, Dan?
Well, like I said, I mean, I agree with what he said. I mean, CBRE, I wasn't aware that they were actively marketing that. I didn't know who, because when I had asked State Farm about it, I got really nothing back other than we're trying to sublet it, but I didn't know CBRE had it. And so, I mean, are you aware of any price per foot, asking price on it?
I believe it was $15 a square foot. I looked at a few properties since I saw the listing, so I wouldn't swear on a Bible to that, but I believe it was $15 a square foot, which is why I went with what I went with on my income.
Oh, and so I guess from an asking versus, what they would actually get, I feel pretty good about the 14 that we used. As far as any kind of sale, like I said, I'm not aware of any active listings for sale.
Okay, other board members have any comment? I kind of made mine. My arm could be twisted, Charles, if you want to give them a little bit more, but I'm not unhappy about sustaining the 29 that we set last year.
Based on the fact that you still have the lease on it,
Right.
I would sustain the 29.
What about you, Charles? Are Ruth and I wrong that the lease is?
No, you're not wrong.
What do you think, though? You're saying it's still declining in marketability, is that it?
Well, then, then you gotta decide, well, who's got to pay the bill?
Yeah,
Well, right now, they've got a lessee in there, you can't get loose.
sure. No, financially, I don't think they're not, they are not at risk financially, yeah. The issue is long-term marketability of this kind of property. And I admit, we're not got a crystal ball either, but.
Anything we do here today doesn't change the tax rate.
That's true. Okay, I will move that we sustain at the 29 million that we set last year. Is there a second to my motion?
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded to sustain. We'll vote as the roll is called.
Dr. Ketchum,
Yes,
Mr. Vandewiller.
Yes.
Ms. Gaines.
Yes.
this is the fair market value as continued by the board in its estimate this year. Daniel, I think that completes our transactions for today.
Yep.
You have a good one, and hopefully we all escape tornadoes tonight, right?
Yeah, definitely. We're fixing to get pretty, I'm looking out my window and so y'all be safe tonight.
You too. Goodbye for now.
All right, we'll see you guys later. And if you don't mind, just, you guys always do mail me the decision letter. So, just, I guess,
You'll get
at least you're gonna just have, yeah. Just mail me that, and I appreciate you guys' time. Thank y'all.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We're off.
Okay.
Turned into a full day.
Boy, they all do right now.
I got it.
I can't write word.
Flip. Almost.
I believe we've reached the moment of adjournment. Why are we all sitting here? Someone make a
I
motion.
move that we adjourn.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote as the roll is called to adjourn.
Dr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Van Will,
Yes.
Ms.